Welcome to Voice of the Pages, the Decameron of Giovanni Boccaccio. Day the 8th. Here beginneth the 8th day of the Decameron, wherein, under the governance of Loretta, is discoursed of the tricks that all day long women play men, or men women, or men one another. Already on the Sunday morning the rays of the rising light appeared on the summits of the higher mountains, and every shadow having departed, things might manifestly be discerned, when the Queen, arising with her company, went wandering first through the dewy grass, and after, towards Half-Tierce, visiting a little neighboring church, heard their divine service. Then, returning home, they ate with mirth and joyance, and after sang and danced awhile till the Queen dismissed them, so whoso would might go rest himself. But when as the sun had passed the meridian, they all seated themselves, according as it pleased the Queen, near the fair fountain, for the wonted story-telling, and Neophile, by her commandment, began thus. The first story. Golfardo borroweth of Guasparulo certain moneys, for which he hath agreed with his wife that he shall lie with her, and accordingly giveth them to her. Then, in her presence, he telleth Guasparulo that he gave them to her, and she confesseth it to be true. Since God hath so ordered it that I am to give a beginning to the present day's discourses, with my story, I am content, and therefore, lovesome ladies, seeing that much hath been said of the tricks played by women upon men, it is my pleasure to relate one played by a man upon a woman, not that I mean therein to blame that which the man did or to deny that it served the woman aright, nay, rather to commend the man and blame the woman, and to show that men also know how to cozen those who put faith in them, even as themselves are cozened by those in whom they believe. Indeed, to speak more precisely, that whereof I have to tell should not be called cozenage, nay, it should rather be styled a just requital, for that, albeit a woman should still be virtuous and guard her chastity as her life, nor on any account suffer herself be persuaded to sully it, yet, seeing that, by reason of our frailty, this is not always possible as fully as should be, I affirm that she who consenteth to her own dishonour for a price is worthy of the fire, whereas she who yieldeth for love sake, knowing his exceeding great puissance, meriteth forgiveness from a judge not too severe, even as a few days agone, Philostrato showed it to have been observed towards Madame Philippa at Prato. There was, then, aforetime at Milan a German, by name Golfardo, in the pay of the state, a stout fellow of his person and very loyal to those in whose service he engaged himself, which is seldom the case with Germans. And for that he was a very punctual repayer of such loans as were made him, he might always find many merchants ready to lend him any quantity of money at little usance. During his sojourn in Milan, he set his heart upon a very fair lady called Madame Ambruogia, the wife of a rich merchant, by name Guasparulo Cagistraccio, who was much his acquaintance and friend, and loving her very discreetly. So that neither her husband nor any other suspected it, he sent one day to speak with her, praying her that it would please her vouchsafe him her favours, and protesting that he, on his part, was ready to do whatsoever she should command him. The lady, after many parleys, came to this conclusion, that she was ready to do that which Golfardo wished, provided two things should ensue thereof. One, that this should never be by him discovered to any, and the other, that, as she had need of 200 gold florins for some occasion of hers, he, who was a rich man, should give them to her, after which she would still be at his service. Golfardo, hearing this and indignant at the sordidness of her whom he had accounted a lady of worth, was like to exchange his fervent love for hatred, and thinking to cheat her, sent back to her, saying that he would very willingly do this and all else in his power that might please her, and that therefore she should e'en send him word when she would have him go to her, for that he would carry her the money, nor should any ever hear aught of the matter, save a comrade of his in whom he trusted greatly, and who still bore him company in whatsoever he did. The lady, or rather, I should say, the vile woman, hearing this, was well pleased, and sent to him, saying that Guasparulo her husband was to go to Genoa for his occasions a few days hence, and that she would presently let him know of this, and send for him. Meanwhile, Golfardo, taking his opportunity, repaired to Guasparulo and said to him, I have present occasion for 200 gold florins, the which I would have thee lend me at that same usance whereat thou art wont to lend me other moneys. The other replied that he would well, and straightway counted out to him the money. A few days thereafterward Guasparulo went to Genoa, even as the lady had said, whereupon she sent to Golfardo to come to her and bring the 200 gold florins. Accordingly, he took his comrade and repaired to the lady's house, where finding her expecting him, the first thing he did was to put into her hands the 200 gold florins in his friend's presence, saying to her, Madam, take these moneys and give them to your husband, whenas he shall be returned. The lady took them, never guessing why he said thus, but supposing that he did it so his comrade should not perceive that he gave them to her by way of price, and answered, With all my heart, but I would fain see how many they are. Accordingly, she turned them out upon the table, and finding them full 200, laid them up, mighty content in herself. Then, returning to Golfardo and carrying him into her chamber, she satisfied him of her person not that night only, but many others before her husband returned from Genoa. As soon as the latter came back, Golfardo, having spied out a time when he was in company with his wife, betook himself to him, together with his comrade aforesaid, and said to him, in the lady's presence, Guasparulo, I had no occasion for the moneys, to wit, the 200 gold florins thou lentest me the other day, for that I could not compass the business for which I borrowed them. Accordingly, I brought them presently back to thy lady here and gave them to her, wherefore look thou cancel my account. Guasparulo, turning to his wife, asked her if she had the moneys, and she, seeing the witness present, knew not how to deny, but said, I had them, and had not yet remembered me to tell thee. Whereupon quoth Guasparulo, Golfardo, I am satisfied. Get you gone, and God go with you. I will settle your account aright. Golfardo gone, the lady, finding herself cozened, gave her husband the dishonorable price of her baseness, and on this wise the crafty lover enjoyed his sordid mistress without cost. The second story. The parish priest of Varlungo leeth with mistress Belcalor and leaveth her a cloak of his in pledge. Then, borrowing a mortar of her, he sendeth it back to her, demanding in return the cloak left by way of token, which the good woman grudgingly giveth him back. Men and ladies alike commended that which Golfardo had done to the sordid Milanese lady, and the queen, turning to Pamphilo, smilingly charged him follow on, whereupon quoth he, Fair ladies, it occurreth to me to tell you a little story against those who continually offend against us, without being open to retaliation on our part, to wit, the clergy, who have proclaimed a crusade against our wives, and who, whenas they avail to get one of the latter under them, conceive themselves to have gained forgiveness of fault and pardon of penalty no otherwise than as they had brought the soldan bound from Alexandria to Avignon, whereof the wretched laymen cannot return them the like, albeit they wreak their ire upon the priests' mothers and sisters, doxies and daughters, assailing them with no less ardor than the former do their wives. Wherefore I purpose to recount to you a village love affair, more laughable for its conclusion than long in words, wherefrom you may yet gather, by way of fruit, that priests are not always to be believed in everything. You must know, then, that there was once at Varlungo, a village very near here, as each of you ladies either knoweth or may have heard, a worthy priest and a lusty of his person in the service of the ladies, who, albeit he knew not over well how to read, nathless regaled his parishioners with store of good and pious saws at the Elmfoot on Sundays, and visited their women, when as they went abroad anywhither, more diligently than any priest who had been there aforetime, carrying them farings and holy water and a stray candle-end or so, whiles even to their houses. Now it chanced that, among other his she-parishioners who were most to his liking, one pleased him over all, by name Mistress Belcalor, the wife of a husbandman who styled himself Bentivania del Mazzo, a jolly, buxom country wench, brown-favoured and tight-made, as apt at turning the mill as any woman alive. Moreover, it was she who knew how to play the tabret and sing, "The water runneth to the ravine, and lead up the hay and the round," when need was, with a fine muckender in her hand and a quaint, better than any woman of her neighborhood. By reason of which things my lord priest became so sore enamored of her that he was like to lose his wits therefore, and would prowl about all day long to get a sight of her. When as he espied her in church of a Sunday morning, he would say a Kyrie and a Sanctus, studying to show himself a past master in descant, that it seemed as it were an ass a-braying, whereas, when he saw her not there, he passed that part of the service over lightly enough. But yet he made shift to do on such wise that neither Bentivania nor any of his neighbors suspected aught, and the better to gain Mistress Belcalore's goodwill, he made her presents from time to time, sending her whiles a clove of garlic, which he had the finest of all the countryside in a garden he tilled with his own hands, and other whiles a punnet of peascods or a bunch of chives or scallions, and when as he saw his opportunity, he would ogle her askance and cast a friendly jibe at her, but she, putting on the prude, made a show of not observing it and passed on with a demure air, wherefore my lord priest could not come by his will of her. It chanced one day that as he sauntered about the quarter on the stroke of noon, he encountered Bentivania del Mazzo, driving an ass laden with gear, and accosting him, asked whither he went. "Faith, sir," answered the husbandman, "to tell you the truth, I am going to town about a business of mine, and am carrying these things to Squire Bonacore de Ginestrito, so he may help me, and I know not what whereof the police court judge hath summoned me by his proctor for a peremptory attendance." The priest was rejoiced to hear this, and said, "Thou dost well, my son. Go now with my benizon and return speedily, and shouldst thou chance to see Lapuccio or Naldino, forget not to bid them bring me those straps they would have for my flails." Bentivania answered that it should be done, and went his way towards Florence, whereupon the priest bethought himself that now was his time to go try his luck with Belcalore. Accordingly, he let not the grass grow under his feet, but set off forthright, and stayed not till he came to her house, and entering in, said, "God send us all well." "Who is within there?" Belcalore, who was gone up into the hayloft, hearing him, said, "Marry, sir, you are welcome. But what are you gaddying it abroad in this heat?" "So God give me good luck," answered he, "I came to abide with thee a while, for that I met thy man going to town." Belcalore came down, and taking a seat, fell to picking over cabbage seed which her husband had threshed out a while before, whereupon quoth the priest to her, "Well, Belcalore, wilt thou still cause me die for thee on this wise?" She laughed and answered, "What is it I do to you?" Quoth he, "Thou dost not to me, but thou sufferest me not do to thee that which I would fain do, and which God commendeth." "Alack," cried Belcalore, go to. "Do priests do such things?" "I do we," replied he, "as well as other men, and why not? And I tell thee more, we do far and away better work, and knowest thou why? Because we grind with a full head of water. But in good sooth it shall be shrewdly to thy profit, and thou wilt but abide quiet, and let me do." "And what might this shrewdly to my profit be?" asked she. "For all you priests are stingier than the devil." Quoth he, "I know not. Ask thou. Wilt have a pair of shoes, or a headlace, or a fine stamel waistband, or what thou wilt?" "Pshaw," cried Belcalore, "I have enough and to spare of such things, but an you wish me so well, why do you not render me a service, and I will do what you will?" Quoth the priest, "Say what thou wilt have of me, and I will do it willingly." Then said she, "Needs must I go to Florence, come Saturday, to carry back the wool I have spun and get my spinning wheel mended, and you will lend me 5 crowns, which I know you have by you. I can take my watchet gown out of pawn, and my Sunday girdle that I brought my husband, for you see I cannot go to church nor to any decent place, because I have them not, and after I will still do what you would have me." "So God give me a good year," replied the priest. "I have them not about me, but believe me, ere Saturday come, I will contrive that thou shalt have them, and that very willingly." "Aye," said Belcalore, "you are all like this, great promisers, and after perform nothing to any. Think you to do with me as you did with Biliazza, who went off with the gittern player? Cock's faith, then, you shall not, for that she is turned a common drab only for that. If you have them not about you, go for them. Alack, cried the priest, put me not upon going all the way home. Thou sayest that I have the luck just now to find thee alone, but maybe, when I return, there will be some one or other here to hinder us, and I know not when I shall find so good an opportunity again. Quoth she, It is well, and you choose to go, go, if not, go without. The priest, seeing that she was not in the humour to do his pleasure without a salvum me fac, whereas he would fain have done it sine custodia, said, Harkye, thou believest not that I will bring thee the money, but, so thou mayst credit me, I will leave thee this my blue cloth cloak. Belcalor raised her eyes and said, what? That cloak? What is it worth? Worth? Answered the priest. I would have thee know that it is cloth of 2 nay, 3 and there be some of our folk here who hold it for 4 It is scarce a fortnight since it cost me 7 crowns of hard money to Lotto the broker, and according to what Buglietto telleth me, and thou knowest he is a judge of this kind of cloth, I had it good 5 shillings over cheap. Indeed, quoth Belcalor. So God be mine aid, I had never thought it. But give it me first of all. My lord priest, who had his arbalest ready cocked, pulled off the cloak and gave it her, and she, after she had laid it up, said, Come, sir, let us go into the barn, for no one ever cometh there. And so they did. There the priest gave her the heartiest busses in the world, and making her sib to God Almighty, solaced himself with her a great while, after which he took leave of her and returned to the parsonage in his cassock, as it were he came from officiating at a wedding. There, bethinking himself that all the candle ends he got by way of offertory in all the year were not worth the half of 5 crowns, him seemed he had done ill, and repenting him of having left the cloak, he fell to considering how he might have it again without cost. Being shrewd enough in a small way, he soon hit upon a device, and it succeeded to his wish, for that on the morrow, it being a holiday, he sent a neighbour's lad of his to Mistress Belcalor's house, with a message praying her be pleased to lend him her stone mortar, for that Binguccio dal Poggio and Nudo Buglietti were to dine with him that morning, and he had a mind to make sauce. She sent it to him, and towards dinner time, the priest, having spied out when Bentivegna and his wife were at meat together, called his clerk and said to him, Carry this mortar back to Belcalor and say to her, His reverence biddeth you gramercy and prayeth you send him back the cloak that the boy left you by way of token. The clerk accordingly repaired to her house, and there, finding her at table with Bentivegna, set down the mortar and did the priest's errand. Belcalor, hearing require the cloak again, would have answered, but her husband said, with an angry air, Takest thou a pledge of his reverence? I vow to Christ, I have a mind to give thee a good clout over the head. Go, give it quickly back to him. Pox take thee. And in future, let him ask what he will of ours, aye, though he should seek our ass, look that it be not denied him. Belcalor rose, grumbling, and pulling the cloak out of the chest, gave it to the clerk, saying, Tell her reverence from me, Belcalor saith, she voweth to God you shall never again pound sauce in her mortar. You have done her no such fine honour of this bout. The clerk made off with the cloak and did her message to the priest, who said, laughing, Tell her, when thou sayest her, that, and she will not lend me her mortar, I will not lend her my pestle, and so we shall be quits. Bentivegna concluded that his wife had said this, because he had chid her, and took no heed thereof, but Belcalor bore the priest a grudge, and held him at arm's length till vintage time, when, he having threatened to cause her go into the mouth of Lucifer the great devil, for very fear she made her peace with him over must and roast chestnuts, and they after made merry together time and again. In lieu of the 5 crowns, the priest let put new parchment to her tabret, and string thereto a cast of hawk's bells, and with this she was fain to be content. The third story. Calandrino, Bruno, and Buffalmacco go coasting along the Mugnon in search of the heliotrope, and Calandrino thinketh to have found it. Accordingly he returneth home, laden with stones, and his wife chiddeth him, whereupon, flying out into a rage, he beateth her and recounteth to his companions that which they know better than he. Pamphilo having made an end of his story, at which the ladies had laughed so much that they laugh yet, the queen bade Elisa follow on, who, still laughing, began, I know not, charming ladies, if with a little story of mine, no less true than pleasant. I shall succeed in making you laugh as much as Pamphilo hath done with his, but I will do my endeavour thereof. In our city, then, which hath ever abounded in various fashions and strange folk, there was once, no great while since, a painter called Calandrino, a simple-witted man and of strange usances. He companied most of his time with other two painters, called the one Bruno and the other Buffalmacco, both very merry men, but otherwise well-advised and shrewd, who consorted with Calandrino for that they oft-times had great diversion of his fashions and his simplicity. There was then also in Florence a young man of a mighty pleasant humour and marvellously adroit in all he had a mind to do, astute and plausible, who was called Maso del Saggio, and who, hearing certain traits of Calandrino's simplicity, determined to amuse himself at his expense by putting off some cheat on him or causing him believe some strange thing. He chanced one day to come upon him in the church of San Giovanni, and seeing him intent upon the carved work and paintings of the pyx, which is upon the altar of the said church, and which had then not long been placed there, he judged the place and time opportune for carrying his intent into execution. Accordingly, acquainting a friend of his with that which he purposed to do, they both drew near unto the place where Calandrino sat alone, and feigning not to see him, fell a-discoursing together of the virtues of divers stones, whereof Maso spoke as authoritatively as if he had been a great and famous lapidary. Calandrino gave ear to their talk, and presently, seeing that it was no secret, he rose to his feet and joined himself to them, to the no small satisfaction of Maso, who, pursuing his discourse, was asked by Calandrino where these wonder-working stones were to be found. Maso replied that the most of them were found in Berlinzone, a city of the Basques, in a country called Bengodi, where the vines are tied up with sausages and a goose is to be had for a farthing and a gosling into the bargain, and that there was a mountain all of grated Parmesan cheese, whereon abode folk who did nothing but make macaroni and ravioli and cook them in capon broth, after which they threw them down thence, and whoso got most thereof had most, and that hard by ran a rivulet of Vernage, the best ever was drunk, without a drop of water therein. Marry, cried Calandrino, that were a fine country, but tell me, what is done with the capons that they boil for broth? Quoth Maso, the Basques eat them all. Then said Calandrino, wast thou ever there? Was I ever there, quotha, replied Maso. If I have been there once, I have been there 1,000 times. And how many miles is it distant hence? Asked Calandrino, and Maso, how many? 1,000,000 or more. You might count them all night and not know. Then, said Calandrino, it must be farther off than the Abruzzi? Aye, indeed, answered Maso, it is a trifle farther. Calandrino, like a simpleton as he was, hearing Maso tell all this with an assured air and without laughing, gave such credence thereto as can be given to whatsoever verity is most manifest, and so, holding it for truth, said, That is over far for my money, though, were it nearer, I tell thee aright I would go thither with thee once upon a time, if but to see the macaroni come tumbling headlong down and take my fill thereof. But tell me, God keep thee merry, is there none of those wonder-working stones to be found in these parts? Aye, is there, answered Maso. There be two kinds of stones of very great virtue found here. The first are the grits of Settignano and Montesi, by virtue whereof, when they are wrought into millstones, flour is made. Wherefore it is said in those parts that grace cometh from God and millstones from Montesi, but there is such great plenty of these grits that they are as little prized with us as emeralds with the folk over yonder, where they have mountains of them bigger than Mount Morello, which shine in the middle of the night, I warrant thee. And thou must know that whoso should cause set fine and perfect millstones before they are pierced, in rings and carry them to the Soldan might have for them what he would. The other is what we lapidaries call heliotrope, a stone of exceeding great virtue, for that whoso hath it about him is not seen of any other person, whereas he is not, what while he holdeth it. Quoth Calandrino, these be indeed great virtues, but where is this second stone found? To which Maso replied that it was commonly found in the Mugnan. What bigness is this stone? Asked Calandrino, and what is its color? Quoth Maso, it is of various sizes, some more and some less, but all are well nigh black of color. Calandrino noted all this in himself, and feigning to have other what to do, took leave of Maso, inwardly determined to go seek the stone in question, but bethought himself not to do it without the knowledge of Bruno and Buffalmacco, whom he most particularly affected. Accordingly he addressed himself to seek for them, so they might, without delay and before any else, set about the search and spent all the rest of the morning seeking them. At last, when it was past none, he remembered him that they were a work in the ladies' convent at Faenza, and leaving all his other business, he betook himself thither well nigh at a run, notwithstanding the great heat. As soon as he saw them, he called them and bespoke them thus, Comrades, and you will hearken to me, we may become the richest men in all Florence, for that I have learned from a man worthy of belief that in the Mugnan is to be found a stone, which whoso carrieth about him is not seen of any, wherefore meseemeth we were best go thither in quest thereof without delay, ere any forestall us. We shall certainly find it, for that I know it well, and when we have gotten it, what have we to do but put it in our poke and getting us to the money-changers' tables, which you know stands still laden with groats and florins, take as much as we will thereof. None will see us, and so may we grow rich of a sudden, without having to smear walls all day long, snail fashion. Bruno and Buffalmacco, hearing this, fell a-laughing in their sleeves, and eyeing each other askance, made a show of exceeding wonderment, and praised Calandrino's counsel, but Bruno asked how the stone in question was called. Calandrino, who was a clod-pated fellow, had already forgotten the name, wherefore quoth he, what have we to do with the name, since we know the virtue of the stone? Meseemeth we were best go about the quest without more ado. Well, then, said Bruno, how is it fashioned? It is of all fashions, replied Calandrino, but all are well nigh black. Wherefore meseemeth that what we have to do is to gather up all the black stones we see, till we happen upon the right. So let us lose no time, but get us gone. Quoth Bruno, wait a while, and turning to his comrade, said, Methinketh Calandrino saith well, but meseemeth this is no season for the search, for that the sun is high and shineth full upon the Mugnan, where it hath dried all the stones, so that certain of those that be there appear presently white, which of a morning, ere the sun have dried them, show black, more by token that, today being a working day, there be many folk, on one occasion or another abroad along the banks, who, seeing us, may guess what we are about, and maybe do likewise, whereby the stone may come to their hands, and we shall have lost the trot for the amble. Meseemeth, and you be of the same way of thinking, that this is a business to be undertaken of a morning, when as the black may be the better known from the white, and of a holiday, when there will be none there to see us. Buffalmacco commended Bruno's counsel, and Calandrino fell in therewith, wherefore they agreed to go seek for the stone all three on the following Sunday morning, and Calandrino besought them over all else not to say a word of the matter to any one alive, for that it had been imparted to him in confidence, and after told them that which he had heard tell of the land of Bengodi, affirming with an oath that it was as he said. As soon as he had taken his leave, the two others agreed with each other what they should do in the matter, and Calandrino impatiently awaited the Sunday morning, which being come, he arose at break of day and called his friends, with whom he sallied forth of the city by the San Gallo gate, and descending into the bed of the Mugnan, began to go searching downstream for the stone. Calandrino, as the eagerest of the three, went on before, skipping nimbly hither and thither, and whenever he espied any black stone, he pounced upon it, and picking it up, thrust it into his bosom. His comrades followed after him, picking up now one stone and now another, but Calandrino had not gone far before he had his bosom full of stones, wherefore, gathering up the skirts of his groan, which was not cut Flanders fashion, he tucked them well into his single all round, and made an ample lap thereof. However, it was no great while ere he had filled it, and making a lap on like wise of his mantle, soon filled this also with stones. Presently, the two others seeing that he had gotten his load, and that dinner time drew nigh, quoth Bruno to Buffalmacco, in accordance with the plan concerted between them, Where is Calandrino? Buffalmacco, who saw him hard by, turned about and looking now here and now there, answered, I know not, but he was before us, but now, cried Bruno, I warrant you he is presently at home at dinner, and hath left us to play the fool here, seeking black stones down the Muggon. Egad, rejoined Buffalmacco, he hath done well to make mock of us, and leave us here, since we were fools enough to credit him. Marry, who but we had been simple enough to believe that a stone of such virtue was to be found in the Muggon? Calandrino, hearing this, concluded that the heliotrope had fallen into his hands, and that by virtue thereof they saw him not, albeit he was present with them, and rejoiced beyond measure at such a piece of good luck, answered them not a word, but determined to return, wherefore, turning back, he set off homeward. Buffalmacco, seeing this, said to Bruno, What shall we do? Why do we not get us gone? Whereto Bruno answered, Let us be gone, but I vow to God that Calandrino shall never again serve me thus, and were I presently near him as I have been all the morning, I would give him such a clout on the shins with this stone that he should have cause to remember this trick for maybe a month to come. To say this and to let fly at Calandrino's shins with the stone were one and the same thing, and the latter, feeling the pain, lifted up his leg and began to puff and blow, but yet held his peace and fared on. Presently Buffalmacco took one of the flints he had picked up and said to Bruno, Look at this fine flint. Here should go for Calandrino's loins. So saying, he let fly and dealt him a sore rap in the small of the back with the stone. Brief, on this wise, now with one word and now with another, they went pelting him up the Mugnon till they came to the San Gallo gate, where they threw down the stones they had gathered and halted a while at the custom house. The officers, forewarned by them, feigned not to see Calandrino and let him pass, laughing heartily at the jest, whilst he, without stopping, made straight for his house, which was near the Canto alla Messina, and fortune so far favoured the cheat that none accosted him, as he came up the stream and after through the city, as, indeed, he met with few, for that well nigh every one was at dinner. Accordingly, he reached his house, thus laden, and as chance would have it, his wife, a fair and virtuous lady, by name Mistress Tessa, was at the stairhead. Seeing him come, and somewhat provoked at his long tarriance, she began to rail at him, saying, Devil take the man! Wilt thou never think to come home betimes? All the folk have already dined when as thou comest back to dinner. Calandrino, hearing this and finding that he was seen, was overwhelmed with chagrin and vexation, and cried out, Alack, wicked woman that thou art, wast thou there? Thou hast undone me, but, by God his faith, I will pay thee therefore. Therewithal he ran up to a little saloon he had, and there disburdened himself of the mass of stones he had brought home. Then, running in a fury at his wife, he laid hold of her by the hair, and throwing her down at his feet, cuffed and kicked her in every part as long as he could wag his arms and legs, without leaving a hair on her head or a bone in her body that was not beaten to a mash, nor did it avail her aught to cry him mercy with clasped hands. Meanwhile Bruno and Buffalmacco, after laughing a while with the keepers of the gate, proceeded with slow step to follow Calandrino afar off, and, presently coming to the door of his house, heard the cruel beating he was in act to give his wife, whereupon, making a show of having but then come back, they called Calandrino, who came to the window, all a sweat and red with anger and vexation, and prayed them come up to him. Accordingly, they went up, making believe to be somewhat vexed, and seeing the room full of stones and the lady, all torn and dishevelled and black and blue in the face for bruises, weeping piteously in one corner of the room, whilst Calandrino sat in another, untrussed and panting like one forspent, eyed them a while, then said, What is this, Calandrino? Art thou for building, that we see all these stones here? And Mistress Tessa, what aileth her? It seemeth thou hast beaten her. What is all this ado? Calandrino, outwearied with the weight of the stones and the fury with which he had beaten his wife, no less than with chagrin for the luck which him seemed he had lost, could not muster breath to give them aught but broken words in reply. Wherefore, as he delayed to answer, Buffalmacco went on, Harkee, Calandrino, whatever other cause for anger thou mightest have had, thou shouldst not have fooled us as thou hast done, in that, after thou hadst carried us off to seek with thee for the wonder working stone, thou leftest us in the Mugnon, like a couple of gulls, and madest off home, without saying so much as God be with you or devil, the which we take exceeding ill, but assuredly this shall be the last trick thou shalt ever play us. Therewithal, Calandrino, enforcing himself, answered, Comrades, be not angered. The case standeth otherwise than as you deem. I, unlucky wretch that I am, had found the stone in question, and you shall hear if I tell truth. When first you questioned one another of me, I was less than 60 yards distant from you, but seeing that you made off and saw me not, I went on before you and came back hither, still keeping a little in front of you. Then, beginning from the beginning, he recounted to them all that they had said and done, first and last, and showed them how the stones had served his back and shins, after which, and I may tell you, continued he, that, when as I entered in at the gate, with all these stones about me which you see here, there was nothing said to me, albeit you know how vexatious and tiresome these gatekeepers used to be in wanting to see everything, more by token that I met by the way several of my friends and gossips, who are still wont to accost me and invite me to drink, but none of them said a word to me, no, nor half a word, as those who saw me not. At last, being come home hither, this accursed devil of a woman presented herself before me, for that, as you know, women cause everything lose its virtue, wherefore I, who might else have called myself the luckiest man in Florence, am become the most unlucky. For this I have beaten her as long as I could wag my fists, and I know not what hindereth me from slitting her weasand. Accursed be the hour when first I saw her, and when she came to me in this house. Then, flaming out into fresh anger, he offered to rise and beat her anew. Bruno and Buffalmacco, hearing all this, made believe to marvel exceedingly, and often confirmed that which Calandrino said, albeit they had the while so great a mind to laugh that they were like to burst. But, seeing him start up in a rage to beat his wife again, they rose upon him and withheld him, avouching that the lady was nowise at fault, but that he had only himself to blame for that which had happened, since he knew that women cause things to lose their virtue, and had not bidden her beware of appearing before him that day, and that God had bereft him of foresight to provide against this, either for that the adventure was not to be his, or because he had had it in mind to cozen his comrades, to whom he should have discovered the matter, as soon as he perceived that he had found the stone. Brief, after many words, they made peace, not without much ado, between him and the woebegone lady, and went their ways, leaving him disconsolate, with the house full of stones. The fourth story. The rector of Fiesole loveth a widow lady, but is not loved by her, and thinking to lie with her, lieth with a serving wench of hers, whilst the lady's brothers cause the bishop find him in this case. Elisa being come to the end of her story, which she had related to the no small pleasure of all the company, the queen turned to Emilia, and signified to her wish that she should follow after with her story, whereupon she promptly began thus. I have not forgotten, noble ladies, that it hath already been shown, in sundry of the foregoing stories, how much we women are exposed to the importunities of the priests and friars and clergy of every kind, but, seeing that so much cannot be said thereof, but that yet more will remain to say, I purpose, to boot, to tell you a story of a rector, who, maugre all the world, would e'en have a gentlewoman wish him well, whether she would or not, whereupon she, like a very discreet woman as she was, used him as he deserved. As all of you know, Fiesole, whose hill we can see hence, was once a very great and ancient city, nor, albeit it is nowadays all undone, hath it ever ceased to be, as it is yet, the seat of a bishop. Near the cathedral church there a widow lady of noble birth, by name Madame Picarda, had an estate, where, for that she was not over well-to-do, she abode the most part of the year in a house of hers that was not very big, and with her, 2 brothers of hers, very courteous and worthy youths. It chanced that, the lady frequenting the cathedral church, and being yet very young and fair and agreeable, the rector of the church became so sore enamored of her that he could think of nothing else, and after a while, making bold to discover his mind to her, he prayed her accept of his love and love him as he loved her. Now he was already old in years, but very young in wit, malapert and arrogant and presumptuous in the extreme, with manners and fashions full of conceit and ill grace, and withal so froward and ill-conditioned that there was none who wished him well. And if any had scant regard for him, it was the lady in question, who not only wished him no whit of good, but hated him worse than the megrims, wherefore, like a discreet woman as she was, she answered him, "Sir, that you love me should be mighty pleasing to me, who am bound to love you and will gladly do so, but between your love and mine nothing unseemly should ever befall. You are my spiritual father and a priest, and are presently well stricken in years, all which things should make you both modest and chaste, whilst I, on the other hand, am no girl, nor do these amorous toys beseem my present condition. For that I am a widow, and you well know what discretion is required in widows, wherefore I pray you hold me excused, for that I shall never love you after the fashion whereof you require me, nor do I wish to be thus loved of you." The rector could get of her no other answer for that time, but nowise daunted or disheartened by the first rebuff, solicited her again and again with the most overweening importunity, both by letter and message, nay, even by word of mouth, whenas he saw her come into the church. Wherefore, her seeming that this was too great and too grievous an annoy, she cast about to rid herself of him after such a fashion as he deserved, since she could no otherwise, but would do not ere she had taken counsel with her brothers. Accordingly, she acquainted them with the rector's behavior towards her and that which she purposed to do, and, having therein full license from them, went a few days after to the church, as was her wont. As soon as the rector saw her, he came up to her and, with his usual assurance, accosted her familiarly. The lady received him with a cheerful countenance, and withdrawing apart with him, after he had said many words to her in his wonted style, she heaved a great sigh and said, "Sir, I have heard that there is no fortalice so strong but that, being every day assaulted, it cometh at last to be taken, and this I can very well see to have happened to myself, for that you have so closely beset me with soft words and with one complaisance and another, that you have made me break my resolve, and I am now disposed, since I please you thus, to consent to be yours." "Gramercy, madam," answered the rector, overjoyed, "to tell you the truth, I have often wondered how you could hold out so long, considering that never did the like betide me with any woman. Nay, I have said whiles, were women of silver, they would not be worth a farthing, for that not one of them would stand the hammer. But let that pass for the present. When and where can we be together?" Whereto quoth the lady, "Sweet my lord, as for the when, it may be what time soever most pleaseth us, for that I have no husband to whom it behoveth me render an account of my nights, but for the where I know not how to contrive." "How?" cried the priest. "Why, in your house to be sure." "Sir," answered the lady, "you know I have 2 young brothers, who come and go about the house with their companions day and night, and my house is not over big, wherefore it may not be there, except one chose to abide their mute fashion, without saying a word or making the least sound, and be in the dark after the manner of the blind. And you be content to do this, it might be, for they meddle not with my bedchamber, but their own is so close to mine that one cannot whisper the least word, without its being heard." "Madam," answered the rector, "this shall not hinder us for a night or 2, against I bethink me where we may forgather more at ease." Quoth she, "Sir, let that rest with you, but of one thing I pray you, that this abide secret, so no word be ever known thereof." "Madam," replied he, "have no fear for that, but, and it may be, make shift that we shall forgather this evening." "With all my heart," said the lady, and appointing him how and when he should come, she took leave of him and returned home. Now she had a serving wench who was not overung, but had the foulest and worst favoured visnomy was ever seen, for she had a nose flat and sore, a mouth all awry, thick lips and great ill-set teeth. Moreover, she inclined to squint, nor was ever without sore eyes, and had a green and yellow complexion, which gave her the air of having passed the summer not at Fiesole, but at Sinigaglia. Besides all this, she was hip-shot and a thought crooked on the right side. Her name was Sutta, but, for that she had such a dog's visnomy of her own, she was called of every one Satazza, and for all she was misshapen of her person, she was not without a spice of roguishness. The lady called her and said to her, "Harkee, Satazza, and thou wilt do me a service this night. I will give thee a fine new shift." Satazza, hearing speak of the shift, answered, "Madam, so you give me a shift, I will cast myself into the fire, let alone otherwhat." "Well, then," said her mistress, "I would have thee lie tonight with a man in my bed and load him with caresses, but take good care not to say a word, lest thou be heard by my brothers, who, as thou knowest, sleep in the next room, and after I will give thee the shift." Quoth Satazza, "With all my heart. I will lie with 6 men, if need be, let alone one." Accordingly, at nightfall, my lord the rector made his appearance, according to agreement, whilst the 2 young men, by the lady's appointment, were in their bedchamber and took good care to make themselves heard. Wherefore he entered the lady's chamber in silence and darkness, and betook himself, as she had bidden him, straight to the bed, whither on her part came Satazza, who had been well lessoned by the lady of that which she had to do. My lord rector, thinking he had his mistress beside him, caught Satazza in his arms and fell to kissing her, without saying a word, and she him, whereupon he proceeded to solace himself with her, taking, as he thought, possession of the long-desired good. The lady, having done this, charged her brothers carry the rest of the plot into execution, wherefore, stealing softly out of the chamber, they made for the great square, and fortune was more favourable to them than they themselves asked in that which they had a mind to do, inasmuch as, the heat being great, the bishop had inquired for the 2 young gentlemen, so he might go a-pleasuring to their house and drink with them. But, seeing them coming, he acquainted them with his wish, and returned with them to their house, where, entering a cool little courtyard of theirs, in which were many flambeaux alight, he drank with great pleasure of an excellent wine of theirs. When he had drunken, the young men said to him, "My lord, since you have done us so much favour as to deign to visit this our poor house, whereto we came to invite you, we would have you be pleased to view a small matter, with which we would fain show you." The bishop answered that he would well, whereupon one of the young men, taking a lighted flambeau in his hand, made for the chamber where my lord rector lay with Satazza, followed by the bishop and all the rest. The rector, to arrive the quicklier at his journey's end, had hastened to take horse, and had already ridden more than 3 miles before they came thither, wherefore, being somewhat weary, he had, notwithstanding the heat, fallen asleep with Satazza in his arms. Accordingly, when the young man entered the chamber, light in hand, and after him the bishop and all the others, he was shown to the prelate in this plight, whereupon he awoke, and seeing the light and the folk about him, was sore abashed and hid his head for fear under the bedclothes. The bishop gave him a sound rating and made him put out his head and see with whom he had lain, whereupon the rector, understanding the trick that had been played him of the lady, what with this, and what with the disgrace him seemed he had gotten, became of a sudden the wofullest man that was I. Then, having, by the bishop's commandment, reclad himself, he was dispatched to his house under good guard, to suffer sore penance for the sin he had committed. The bishop presently inquiring how it came to pass that he had gone thither to lie with Satazza, the young men orderly related everything to him, which having heard, he greatly commended both the lady and her brothers for that, without choosing to imbrue their hands in the blood of a priest, they had entreated him as he deserved. As for the rector, He caused him bewail his offence 40 days' space, but love and despite made him rue it for more than 49, more by token that, for a great while after, he could never go abroad, but the children would point at him and say, See, there is he who lay with Satotsa, the which was so sore and annoyed to him that he was like to go mad therefore. On such wise did the worthy lady rid herself of the importunity of the malapert rector, and Satotsa gained the shift and a merry night. The fifth story. 3 young men pull the breeches off a Marchigan judge in Florence, what while he is on the bench, administering justice. Amelia having made an end of her story, and the widow lady having been commended of all, the queen looked to Philostrato and said, It is now thy turn to tell. He answered promptly that he was ready and began, Delightsome ladies, the mention by Elisa a little before of a certain young man, to wit, Maso del Saggio, hath caused me leave a story I purpose to tell you. So I may relate to you one of him and certain companions of his, which if, albeit it is nowise unseemly, it offers certain expressions which you think shame to use, is naveless so laughable that I will e'en tell it. As you may all have heard, there come oftentimes to our city governors from the marches of Ancona, who are commonly mean-spirited folk, and so paltry and sordid of life that their every fashion seemeth not other than a lousy cadger's trick. And of this innate paltriness and avarice, they bring with them judges and notaries, who seem men taken from the plough-tail or the cobbler's stall rather than from the schools of law. Now, one of these being come hither for provost, among the many judges whom he brought with him was one who styled himself Messer Nicola de San Lapidio, and who had more the air of a tinker than of aught else, and he was set with other judges to hear criminal causes. As it oft happeneth that, for all the townsfolk have not in the world to do at the courts of law, yet by times they go thither, it befell that Maso del Saggio went thither one morning, in quest of a friend of his, and chancing to cast his eyes whereas this said Messer Nicola sat, him seemed that here was a rare outlandish kind of wild fowl. Accordingly, he went on to examine him from head to foot, and albeit he saw him with the miniver bonnet on his head, all black with smoke and grease, and a paltry inkhorn at his girdle, a gown longer than his mantle, and store of other things all foreign to a man of good breeding and manners, yet of all these the most notable, to his thinking, was a pair of breeches, the backside whereof, as the judge sat, with his clothes standing open in front for straightness, he perceived came halfway down his legs. Thereupon, without tarrying longer to look upon him, he left him with whom he went seeking, and beginning a new quest, presently found 2 comrades of his, called one Ribby and the other Matuzzo, men much of the same mad humour as himself, and said to them, As you tender me, come with me to the law courts, for I wish to show you the rarest scarecrow you ever saw. Accordingly, carrying them to the court-house, he showed them the aforesaid judge and his breeches, whereat they fell a-laughing, as soon as they caught sight of him afar off. Then, drawing nearer to the platform whereon my lord judge sat, they saw that one might lightly pass thereunder, and that, moreover, the boards under his feet were so broken that one might with great ease thrust his hand and arm between them, whereupon quoth Maso to his comrades, Needs must we pull him off those breeches of his altogether, for that it may very well be done. Each of the others had already seen how, wherefore, having agreed among themselves what they should say and do, they returned thither next morning, when, the court being very full of folk, Matuzzo, without being seen of any, crept under the bench and posted himself immediately beneath the judge's feet. Meanwhile, Maso came up to my lord judge on one side, and taking him by the skirt of his gown, whilst Ribby did the like on the other side, began to say, my lord, I pray you for God's sake, ere yonder scurvy thief on the other side of you go elsewhere, make him restore me a pair of saddlebags whereof he hath saith indeed he did it not, but I saw him, not a month ago, in act to have them resold. Ribby on his side cried out with all his might, Believe him not, my lord, he is an arrant knave, and for that he knoweth I am come to lay a complaint against him for a pair of saddlebags whereof he hath robbed me, he cometh now with his story of the buthos, which I have had in my house this many a day. And you believe me not? I can bring you to witness my next-door neighbor Trecca and Grassa the tripe woman, and one who goeth gathering the sweepings from Santa Masia at Vergazza, who saw him when he came back from the country. Maso, on the other hand, suffered not Ribby to speak, but bawled his loudest, whereupon the other but shouted the more. The judge stood up and leaned towards them, so he might the better apprehend what they had to say, wherefore Metuzzo, watching his opportunity, thrust his hand between the crack of the boards and laying hold of Messer Nicholas Galligaskines by the breech, tugged at them amain. The breeches came down incontinent, for that the judge was lean and lank of the crupper, whereupon, feeling this and knowing not what it might be, he would have sat down again and pulled his skirts forward to cover himself. But Maso on the one side and Ribby on the other still held him fast and cried out, "My lord, you duel not to do me justice and to seek to avoid hearing me and get you gone otherwhere. There be no writs granted in this city for such small matters as this." So saying, they held him fast by the clothes on such wise that all who were in the court perceived that his breeches had been pulled down. However, Metuzzo, after he had held them a while, let them go, and coming forth from under the platform, made off out of the court and went his way without being seen, whereupon quoth Ribby, him seeming he had done enough, "I vow to God I will appeal to the syndicate." Whilst Maso, on his part, let go the mantle and said, "Nay, I will e'en come hither again and again until such time as I find you not hindered as you seem to be this morning." So saying, they both made off as quickly as they might, each on his own side, whilst my lord judge pulled up his breeches in every one's presence, as if he were arisen from sleep. Then, perceiving how the case stood, he inquired whither they were gone who were at difference anent the bouthos and the saddlebags, but they were not to be found, whereupon he began to swear by cock's bowels that need must he know and learn if it were the wont at Florence to pull down the judge's breeches, whenas they sat on the judicial bench. The provost, on his part, hearing of this, made a great stir, but his friends having shown him that this had only been done to give him notice that the Florentines right well understood how, whereas he should have brought judges, he had brought them sorry patches. To have them better cheap, he thought it best to hold his peace, and so the thing went no farther for the nonce. The sixth story. Bruno and Buffalmacco, having stolen a pig from Calandrino, make him try the ordeal with ginger boluses and sack, and give him, instead of the ginger, 2 dog balls compounded with aloes, whereby it appeareth that he himself hath had the pig, and they make him pay blackmail, and he would not have them tell his wife. No sooner had Philostrato dispatched his story, which had given rise to many a laugh, than the queen bade Philomena follow on, whereupon she began, "Gracious ladies," even as Philostrato was led by the mention of Maso to tell the story which you have just heard from him, so neither more nor less am I moved by that of Calandrino and his friends to tell you another of them which methinketh will please you. Who Calandrino, Bruno, and Buffalmacco were I need not explain to you, for that you have already heard it well enough, wherefore, to proceed with my story, I must tell you that Calandrino owned a little farm at no great distance from Florence, that he had had to his wife's dowry. From this farm, amongst other things that he got thence, he had every year a pig, and it was his wont still to betake himself thither, he and his wife, and kill the pig, and have it salted on the spot. It chanced one year that, his wife being somewhat ailing, he went himself to kill the pig, which Bruno and Buffalmacco hearing and knowing that his wife was not gone to the farm with him, they repaired to a priest, very great friend of theirs and a neighbor of Calandrino, to sojourn some days with him. Now Calandrino had that very morning killed the pig, and seeing them with the priest, called to them, saying, "You are welcome. I would fain have you see what a good husband I am." Then carrying them into the house, he showed them the pig, which they seeing to be a very fine one, and understanding from Calandrino that he meant to salt it down for his family, "Good luck," quoth Bruno to him, "what a ninny thou art! Sell it, and let us make merry with the price, and tell thy wife that it hath been stolen from thee." "Nay," answered Calandrino, "she would never believe it, and would drive me out of the house." "Spare your pains, for I will never do it." And many were the words, but they availed nothing. Calandrino invited them to supper, but with so ill a grace that they refused to sup there and took their leave of him. Whereupon quoth Bruno and Buffalmacco, "What sayest thou to stealing yonder pig from him tonight?" "Marry," replied the other, "how can we do it?" Quoth Bruno, "I can see how well enough, and he remove it not from where it was but now." "Then," rejoined his companion, "let us do it." "Why should we not? And after we will make merry over it with the parson here." The priest answered that he would well, and Bruno said, "Here must some little art be used. Thou knowest, Buffalmacco, how niggardly Calandrino is and how gladly he drinketh when others pay. Let us go and carry him to the tavern, where the priest shall make believe to pay the whole scot in our honor, nor suffer him to pay aught. Calandrino will soon grow fuddled, and then we can manage it lightly enough, for that he is alone in the house." As he said, so they did, and Calandrino, seeing that the priest suffered none to pay, gave himself up to drinking and took in a good load, albeit it needed no great matter to make him drunk. It was pretty late at night when they left the tavern, and Calandrino, without troubling himself about supper, went straight home, where, thinking to have shut the door, he left it open and betook himself to bed. Buffalmacco and Bruno went off to sup with the priest, and after supper repaired quietly to Calandrino's house, carrying with them certain implements wherewithal to break in whereas Bruno had appointed it, but, finding the door open, they entered and unhooking the pig, carried it off to the priest's house, where they laid it up and betook themselves to sleep. On the morrow Calandrino, having slept off the fumes of the wine, arose in the morning and going down, missed his pig and saw the door open, whereupon he questioned this one and that if they knew who had taken it, and getting no news of it, began to make a great outcry, saying, "Woe is me, miserable wretch that I am, for that the pig had been stolen from him." As soon as Bruno and Buffalmacco were risen, they repaired to Calandrino's house, to hear what he would say anent the pig, and he no sooner saw them than he called out to them, well nigh weeping, and said, "Woe's me, comrades mine, my pig hath been stolen from me." Whereupon Bruno came up to him and said softly, "It is a marvel that thou hast been wise for once." "Alack," replied Calandrino, "indeed I say sooth." "That's the thing to say," quoth Bruno. "Make a great outcry, so it may well appear that it is e'en as thou sayest." Therewithal Calandrino bawled out yet loudlier, saying, "Cock's body, I tell thee it hath been stolen from me in good earnest." "Good, good," replied Bruno. "That's the way to speak. Cry out lustily, make thyself well heard, so it may seem true." Quoth Calandrino, "Thou wouldst make me give my soul to the fiend. I tell thee, and thou believest me not." "May I be strung up by the neck and it have not been stolen from me." "Good luck," cried Bruno. "How can that be? I saw it here but yesterday. Thinkest thou to make me believe that it hath flown away?" Quoth Calandrino, "It is as I tell thee." "Good luck," repeated Bruno. "Can it be?" "Certes," replied Calandrino, "it is so, more by token that I am undone and know not how I shall return home. My wife will never believe me, or even if she do, I shall have no peace with her this year to come." Quoth Bruno, "So God save me, this is ill done, if it be true, but thou knowest, Calandrino, I lessoned thee yesterday to say thus, and I would not have thee at once cozen thy wife and us." Therewithal Calandrino fell to crying out and saying, "Alack, why will you drive me to desperation and make me blaspheme God and the saints? I tell you the pig was stolen from me yesternight." Then said Buffalmacco, "If it be so indeed, we must cast about for a means of having it again, and we may contrive it." "But what means," asked Calandrino, "can we find?" Quoth Buffalmacco, "We may be sure that there hath come none from the Indies to rob thee of thy pig. The thief must have been some one of thy neighbors. And thou canst make shift to assemble them. I know how to work the ordeal by bread and cheese, and we will presently see for certain who hath had it." "Aye," put in Bruno, "thou wouldst make a fine thing of bread and cheese with such gentry as we have about here, for one of them I am certain hath had the pig, and he would smoke the trap and would not come." "How then shall we do?" asked Buffalmacco, and Bruno said, "We must e'en do it with ginger boluses and good vernage, and invite them to drink." they will suspect nothing and come, and the ginger boluses can be blessed even as the bread and cheese. Quoth Buffalmacco, indeed, thou say'st sooth. What say'st thou, Calandrino? Shall'st do tea? Nay, replied the gull, I pray you thereof for the love of God, for, did I but know who hath had it, I should hold myself half consoled. Marry then, said Bruno, I am ready to go to Florence, to oblige thee, for the things aforesaid, so thou wilt give me the money. Now Calandrino had maybe 40 shillings, which he gave him, and Bruno accordingly repaired to Florence to a friend of his, a druggist, of whom he bought a pound of fine ginger boluses and caused compound a couple of dog balls with fresh confect of hepatic aloes, after which he let cover these latter with sugar, like the others, and set thereon a privy mark by which he might very well know them, so he should not mistake them nor change them. Then, buying a flask of good vernage, he returned to Calandrino in the country and said to him, Do thou tomorrow morning invite those whom thou suspectest to drink with thee. It is a holiday and all will willingly come. Meanwhile, Buffalmacco and I will tonight make the conjuration over the pills and bring them to thee tomorrow morning at home, and for the love of thee I will administer them myself and do and say that which is to be said and done. Calandrino did as he said, and assembled on the following morning a goodly company of such young Florentines as were presently about the village and of husbandmen. Whereupon Bruno and Buffalmacco came with a box of pills and the flask of wine, and made the folk stand in a ring. Then said Bruno, Gentlemen, needs must I tell you the reason wherefore you are here, so that, if aught betide that please you not, you may have no cause to complain of me. Calandrino here was robbed yesternight of a fine pig, nor can he find who hath had it, and for that none other than some one of us who are here can have stolen it from him, he proffereth each of you, that he may discover who hath had it, one of these pills to eat and a draught of wine. Now you must know that he who hath had the pig will not be able to swallow the pill. Nay, it will seem to him more bitter than poison, and he will spit it out. Wherefore, rather than that shame be done him in the presence of so many, he were better tell it to the parson by way of confession, and I will proceed no farther with this matter. All who were there declared that they would willingly eat of the pills, whereupon Bruno ranged them in order and set Calandrino among them. Then, beginning at one end of the line, he proceeded to give each his bolus, and whenas he came over against Calandrino, he took one of the dog balls and put it into his hand. Calandrino clapped it incontinent into his mouth and began to chew it, but no sooner did his tongue taste the aloes than he spat it out again, being unable to brook the bitterness. Meanwhile, each was looking other in the face to see who should spit out his bolus, and whilst Bruno, not having made an end of serving them out, went on to do so, feigning to pay no heed to Calandrino's doing, he heard say behind him, How now, Calandrino? What meaneth this? Whereupon he turned suddenly round, and seeing that Calandrino had spat out his bolus, said, Stay, maybe somewhat else hath caused him spit it out. Take another of them. Then, taking the other dog ball, he thrust it into Calandrino's mouth, and went on to finish giving out the rest. If the first ball seemed bitter to Calandrino, the second was bitterer yet, but, being ashamed to spit it out, he kept it a while in his mouth, chewing it and shedding tears that seemed hazelnuts, so big they were, till at last, unable to hold out longer, he cast it forth like as he had the first. Meanwhile Buffalmacco and Bruno gave the company to drink, and all, seeing this, declared that Calandrino had certainly stolen the pig from himself. Nay, there were those there who rated him roundly. After they were all gone, and the two rogues left alone with Calandrino, Buffalmacco said to him, I still had it for certain that it was thou took'st the pig thyself, and wouldst fain make us believe that it had been stolen from thee, to escape giving us one poor while to drink of the moneys thou hadst for it. Calandrino, who was not yet quit of the bitter taste of the aloes, began to swear that he had not had it, and Buffalmacco said, But in good earnest, comrade, what gottest thou for it? Was it 6 florins? Calandrino, hearing this, began to wax desperate, and Bruno said, Harkee, Calandrino, there was such an one in the company that ate and drank with us, who told me that thou hast a wench over yonder. whom thou keepest for thy pleasure, and to whom thou givest whatsoever thou canst scrape together, and that he held it for certain that thou hadst sent her the pig. Thou hast learned of late to play pranks of this kind. Thou carriedst us off t'other day down the Mugnon, picking up black stones, and when as thou hadst gotten us aboard ship without biscuit, thou madest off, and wouldst after have us believe that thou hadst found the magic stone. And now on like wise thou thinkest, by dint of oaths, to make us believe that the pig, which thou hast given away, or more like sold, hath been stolen from thee. But we are used to thy tricks and know them. Thou shalt not avail to play us any more of them, and to be plain with thee, since we have been at pains to make the conjuration, we mean that thou shalt give us 2 pairs of capons, else will we tell Mistress Tessa everything. Calandrino, seeing that he was not believed and him seeming he had had vexation enough, without having his wife scolding into the bargain, gave them 2 pairs of capons, which they carried off to Florence after they had salted the pig, leaving Calandrino to digest the loss and the flouting as best he might. The 7th story. A scholar loveth a widow lady, who, being enamoured of another, causeth him spend 1 winter's night in the snow awaiting her, and he after contriveth, by his sleight, to have her abide naked, all one mid-July day, on the summit of a tower, exposed to flies and gads and sun. The ladies laughed amain at the unhappy Calandrino, and would have laughed yet more, but that it irked them to see him fleeced of the capons, to boot, by those who had already robbed him of the pig. But as soon as the end of the story was come, the queen charged Pampinea tell hers, and she promptly began thus: It chanceth oft, dearest ladies, that craft is put to scorn by craft, and it is therefore a sign of little wit to delight in making mock of others. We have, for several stories, laughed amain at tricks that have been played upon folk, and whereof no vengeance is recorded to have been taken. But I purpose now to cause you have some compassion of a just retribution wreaked upon a townswoman of ours, on whose head her own cheat recoiled, and was retorted well nigh unto death, and the hearing of this will not be without profit unto you, for that henceforward you will the better keep yourselves from making mock of others, and in this you will show great good sense. Not many years ago there was in Florence a young lady, by name Elena, fair of favour and haughty of humour, of very gentle lineage, and endowed with sufficient abundance of the goods of fortune, who, being widowed of her husband, chose never to marry again, for that she was enamoured of a handsome and agreeable youth of her own choice, and with the aid of a maid of hers, in whom she put great trust, being quit of every other care, she often with marvellous delight gave herself a good time with him. In these days it chanced that a young gentleman of our city, by name Ranieri, having long studied in Paris, not for the sake of after selling his knowledge by retail, as many do, but to know the nature of things and their causes, the which excellently becometh a gentleman, returned thence to Florence, and there lived citizen fashion, much honoured as well for his nobility as for his learning. But as it chanceth often that those who have the most experience of things profound are the soonest snared of love, even so it befell this Ranieri, for, having one day repaired, by way of diversion, to an entertainment, there presented herself before his eyes the aforesaid Elena, clad all in black, as our widows go, and full, to his judgment, of such beauty and pleasantness as him seemed he had never beheld in any other woman. And in his heart he deemed that he might call himself blessed whom God should vouchsafe to hold her naked in his arms. Then, furtively considering her once and again, and knowing that great things and precious were not to be acquired without travail, he altogether determined in himself to devote all his pains and all his diligence to the pleasing her, to the end that thereby he might gain her love, and so avail to have his fill of her. The young lady, who kept not her eyes fixed upon the nether world, but, conceiting herself as much and more than as much as she was, moved them artfully hither and thither, gazing all about, and was quick to note who delighted to look upon her, soon became aware of Ranieri, and said, laughing in herself, I have not come hither in vain today, for, and I mistake not, I have caught a woodcock by the bill. Accordingly, She fell to ogling him from time to time with the tail of her eye, and studied, inasmuch as she might, to let him see that she took note of him, thinking that the more men she allured and ensnared with her charms, so much the more of price would her beauty be, especially to him on whom she had bestowed it, together with her love. The learned scholar, laying aside philosophical speculations, turned all his thoughts to her, and thinking to please her, inquired where she lived, and proceeded to pass to and fro before her house, coloring his comings and goings with various pretexts, whilst the lady, idly glorying in this, for the reason already set out, made believe to take great pleasure in seeing him. Accordingly, he found means to clap up an acquaintance with her maid, and discovering to her his love, prayed her make interest for him with her mistress, so he might avail to have her favor. The maid promised freely, and told the lady, who hearkened with the heartiest laughter in the world, and said, "Sayest thou where yonder man cometh to lose the wit he hath brought back from Paris? Marry, we will give him that which he goeth seeking. And he bespeak thee again, do thou tell him that I love him far more than he loveth me, but that it behoveth me look to mine honour, so I may hold up my head with the other ladies, whereof, and he be as wise as folks say, he will hold me so much the dearer." Alack, poor silly soul, she knew not aright, ladies mine, what it is to try conclusions with scholars. The maid went in search of Ranieri, and finding him, did that which had been enjoined her of her mistress, whereat he was overjoyed, and proceeded to use more urgent entreaties, writing letters and sending presents, all of which were accepted. But he got nothing but vague and general answers, and on this wise she held him in play a great while. At last, to show her lover, to whom she had discovered everything, and who was whiles somewhat vexed with her for this, and had conceived some jealousy of Ranieri, that he did wrong to suspect her thereof, she dispatched to the scholar, now grown very pressing, her maid, who told him, on her mistress's part, that she had never yet had an opportunity to do aught that might pleasure him since he had certified her of his love, but that on the occasion of the festival of the Nativity she hoped to be able to be with him, wherefore, an it liked him, he was on the evening of the feast to come by night to her courtyard, whither she would go for him as first she might. At this the scholar was the gladdest man alive, and betook himself at the appointed time to his mistress's house, where he was carried by the maid into a courtyard, and being there locked in, proceeded to wait the lady's coming. The latter had that evening sent for her lover, and after she had supped merrily with him, she told him that which she purposed to do that night, adding, "And thou mayst see for thyself what and how great is the love I have borne and bear him of whom thou hast taken a jealousy." The lover heard these words with great satisfaction, and was impatient to see by the fact that which the lady gave him to understand with words. It had by chance snowed hard during the day, and everything was covered with snow, wherefore the scholar had not long abidden in the courtyard before he began to feel colder than he could have wished, but, looking to recruit himself speedily, he was fain to endure it with patience. Presently, the lady said to her lover, "Let us go look from a lattice what yonder fellow, of whom thou art waxed jealous, doth, and hear what he shall answer the maid, whom I have sent to parley with him." Accordingly, they betook themselves to a lattice, and thence, seeing without being seen, they heard the maid from another lattice bespeak the scholar and say, "Ranieri, my lady is the wofullest woman that was I, for that there is one of her brothers come hither tonight." "Well, how sayst thou? Thinkest thou that, an I wished him such weal as thou fearest, I would suffer him stand a freezing down yonder?" So saying, she betook herself to bed with her lover, who was now in part satisfied, and there they abode a great while in joyance and lease, laughing and making mock of the wretched scholar, who fared to and fro the while in the courtyard, making shift to warm himself with exercise, nor had whereas he might seat himself or shelter from the night damp. He cursed her brother's long stay with the lady, and took everything he heard for the opening of a door to him by her, but hoped in vain. The lady, having solaced herself with her lover till near upon midnight, said to him, "How deemest thou, my soul, of our scholar?" Whether seemeth to thee the greater, his wit or the love I bear him? Will the cold which I presently cause him suffer do away from thy mind the doubts which my pleasantries aroused therein the other day? Whereto he replied, Heart of my body, yes, I know right well that, like as thou art my good and my peace and my delight and all my hope, even so am I thine. Then, rejoined she, kiss me 1,000 times, so I may see if thou say sooth. Whereupon he clipped her fast in his arms and kissed her not 1,000, but more than 100,000 times. Then, after they had abidden a while in such discourse, the lady said, Mary, let us arise a little and go see if the fire is any deal spent, wherein this my new lover wrote me that he burnt all day long. Accordingly, they arose and getting them to the accustomed lattice, looked out into the courtyard, where they saw the scholar dancing a right merry jig on the snow, so fast and brisk that never had they seen the like, to the sound of the chattering of the teeth that he made for excess of cold. Whereupon quoth the lady, How sayst thou, sweet my hope? Seemeth to thee that I know how to make folk jig it without sound of trump or bagpipe. Whereto he answered, laughing, I dost thou, my chief delight. Quoth the lady, I will that we go down to the door, thou shalt abide quiet, whilst I bespeak him, and we shall hear what he will say, belike we shall have no less diversion thereof than we had from seeing him. Accordingly, they softly opened the chamber and stole down to the door, where, without opening it any deal, the lady called to the scholar in a low voice by a little hole that was there. Ranieri, hearing himself called, praised God, taking it over soon for granted that he was to be presently admitted, and coming up to the door, said, Here am I, madam, open for God's sake, for I die of cold. Oh, replied the lady, I know thou art a chilly one. Is then the cold so exceeding great, because, forsooth, there is a little snow about? I wot the nights are much colder in Paris. I cannot open to thee yet, for that accursed brother of mine, who came to sup with me tonight, is not yet gone, but he will soon be gone, and I will come incontinent to open to thee. I have but now very hardly stolen away from him, that I might come to exhort thee not to wax weary of waiting. Alack, madam, cried the scholar, I pray you for God's sake open to me, so I may abide within under cover, for that this little while past there is come on the thickest snow in the world, and it yet snoweth, and I will wait for you as long as it shall please you. Woe's me, sweet my treasure, replied the lady, that cannot I, for this door mocketh so great a noise, when as it is opened, that it would lightly be heard of my brother, if I should open to thee, but I will go bid him be gone, so I may after come back and open to thee. Then go quickly, rejoined he, and I prithee let make a good fire, so I may warm me as soon as I come in, for that I am grown so cold I can scarce feel myself. Quoth the lady, That should not be possible, and that be true which thou hast many a time written me, to wit, that thou burnest for the love of me. Now I must go, wait, and be of good heart. Then, with her lover, who had heard all this with the utmost pleasure, she went back to bed, and that night they slept little, nay, they spent it well nigh all in dalliance and delight, and in making mock of Ranieri. Meanwhile, the unhappy scholar, now well nigh grown a stork, so sore did his teeth chatter, perceiving at last that he was befooled, essayed again and again to open the door, and sought and he might not avail to issue thence by another way, but, finding no means thereunto, he fell a-ranging to and fro like a lion, cursing the foulness of the weather and the lady's malignity and the length of the night, together with his own credulity, wherefore, being sore despite against his mistress, the long and ardent love he had borne her was suddenly changed to fierce and bitter hatred, and he revolved in himself many and various things, so he might find a means of revenge, the which he now desired far more eagerly than he had before desired to be with the lady. At last, after much long tarriance, the night drew near unto day, and the dawn began to appear, whereupon the maid, who had been lessoned by the lady, coming down, opened the courtyard door, and feigning to have compassion of Ranieri, said, Bad luck may he have who came hither yestereve. He hath kept us all night upon thorns, and hath caused thee freeze. But knowest thou what? Bear it with patience, for that which could not be tonight shall be another time. Indeed, I know naught could have happened that had been so displeasing to my lady. The despiteful scholar, like a wise man as he was, who knew that threats are but arms for the threatened, locked up in his breast that which untempered will would fain have vented and said in a low voice, without anywise showing himself vexed, "In truth I have had the worst night I ever had, but I have well apprehended that the lady is nowise to blame for this, inasmuch as she herself of her compassion for me came down hither to excuse herself and to hearten me, and as thou sayest, that which hath not been tonight shall be another time. Commend me to her, and God be with thee." Therewithal, well nigh stark with cold, he made his way, as best he might, back to his house, where, being drowsed to death, he cast himself upon his bed to sleep, and awoke well nigh crippled of his arms and legs. Wherefore, sending for sundry physicians and acquainting them with the cold he had suffered, he caused take order for his cure. The leeches, plying him with prompt and very potent remedies, hardly, after some time, availed to recover him of the shrinking of the sinews and cause them relax, and but that he was young and that the warm season came on, he had overmuch to suffer. However, being restored to health and lustihead, he kept his hate to himself and feigned himself more than ever enamored of his widow. Now it befell, after a certain space of time, that fortune furnished him with an occasion of satisfying his desire for vengeance, for that the youth beloved of the widow being, without any regard for the love she bore him, fallen enamored of another lady, would have nor little nor much to say to her nor do aught to pleasure her, wherefore she pined in tears and bitterness. But her maid, who had great compassion of her, finding no way of rousing her mistress from the chagrin into which the loss of her lover had cast her, and seeing the scholar pass along the street, after the wonted manner, entered into a fond conceit, to wit, that the lady's lover might be brought by some necromantic operation or other to love her as he had been wont to do, and that the scholar should be a past master in this manner of thing, and told her thought to her mistress. The latter, little wise, without considering that, had the scholar been acquainted with the black art, he would have practiced it for himself, lent her mind to her maid's words, and bade her forthright learn from him if he would do it, and give him all assurance that, in requital thereof, she would do whatsoever pleased him. The maid did her errand well and diligently, which when the scholar heard, he was overjoyed and said in himself, "Praised be thou my God. The time is come when with thine aid I may avail to make yonder wicked woman pay the penalty of the harm she did me in requital of the great love I bore her." Then to the maid, "Tell my lady," quoth he, "that she need be in no concern for this, for that, were her lover in the Indies, I would speedily cause him come to her and crave pardon of that which he hath done to displeasure her. But the means she must take to this end I purpose to impart to herself, when and where it shall most please her. So say to her and hearten her on my part." The maid carried his answer to her mistress, and it was agreed that they should foregather at Santa Lucia del Prado, whither, accordingly, the lady and the scholar being come and speaking together alone, she, remembering her not that she had aforetime brought him well nigh to death's door, openly discovered to him her case, and that which she desired, and besought him to succor her. "Madam," answered he, "it is true that amongst the other things I learned at Paris was necromancy, whereof for certain I know that which is extant thereof, but for that the thing is supremely displeasing unto God, I had sworn never to practice it either for myself or for others. Nevertheless, the love I bear you is of such potency that I know not how I may deny you aught that you would have me do, wherefore, though it should behove me for this alone go to the devil's stead, I am yet ready to do it, since it is your pleasure. But I must forewarn you that the thing is more uneath to do than you perchance imagine, especially when as a woman would recall a man to loving her or a man a woman, for that this cannot be done save by the very person unto whom it pertaineth. And it behoveth that whoso doth it be of an assured mind, seeing it must be done a nights and in solitary places without company, which things I know not how you are disposed to do." The lady, more enamored than discreet, replied, "Love spurreth me on such wise that there is nothing I would not do to have again him who hath wrongfully forsaken me. All gates, and it please you, show me in what I must approve myself assured of mind. Madam, replied the scholar, who had a patch of ill hair to his tail, I must make an image of pewter in his name whom you desire to get again, which when as I shall send you, it will behove you 7 times bathe yourself therewith, all naked, in a running stream. At the hour of the first sleep, what time the moon is far on the wane. Thereafter, naked as you are, you must get you up into a tree or to the top of some uninhabited house, and turning to the north, with the image in your hand, 7 times running say certain words which I shall give you written, which when you shall have done, there will come to you 2 of the fairest damsels you ever beheld, who will salute you and ask you courteously what you would have done. Do you well and thoroughly discover to them your desires, and look it betide you not to name one for another. As soon as you have told them, they will depart, and you may then come down to the place where you shall have left your clothes and reclothe yourself and return home, and for certain, ere it be the middle of the ensuing night, your lover will come, weeping, to crave you pardon and mercy, and know that from that time forth he will never again leave you for any other. The lady, hearing all this and lending entire faith thereto, was half comforted, her seeming she already had her lover again in her arms, and said, Never fear, I will very well do these things, and I have therefore the finest commodity in the world. For I have, towards the upper end of the Val d'Arno, a farm which is very near the river bank, and it is now July, so that bathing will be pleasant, more by token that I mind me there is, not far from the stream, a little uninhabited tower, save that the shepherds climb up bytimes, by a ladder of chestnut wood that is there, to a solar at the top, to look for their strayed beasts, otherwise it is a very solitary out-of-the-way place. Thither will I betake myself, and there I hope to do that which you shall enjoin me the best in the world. The scholar, who very well knew both the place and the tower mentioned by the lady, was rejoiced to be certified of her intent, and said, Madam, I was never in these part, and therefore know neither the farm nor the tower, but, an it be as you say, nothing in the world can be better. Wherefore, whenas it shall be time, I will send you the image and the conjuration, but I pray you instantly, whenas you shall have gotten your desire, and shall know I have served you well, that you be mindful of me and remember to keep your promise to me. She answered that she would without fail do it, and taking leave of him, returned to her house, whilst the scholar, rejoiced for that him seemed his desire was like to have effect, made an image with certain talismanic characters of his own devising, and wrote a rigmarole of his fashion by way of conjuration, the which, when as it seemed to him time, he dispatched to the lady and sent to tell her that she must that very night, without more tarriance, do that which he had enjoined her, after which he secretly betook himself, with a servant of his, to the house of one of his friends who abode very near the tower, so he might give effect to his design. The lady, on her part, set out with her maid and repaired to her farm, where, as soon as the night was come, she made a show of going to bed and sent the maid away to sleep, but towards the hour of the first sleep, she issued quietly forth of the house and betook herself to the bank of the Arno hard by the tower, where, looking first well all about and seeing nor hearing any, she put off her clothes and hiding them under a bush, bathed 7 times with the image, after which, naked as she was, she made for the tower, image in hand. The scholar, who had, at the coming on of the night, hidden himself with his servant among the willows and other trees near the tower, and had witnessed all this, seeing her as she passed thus naked close to him, overcome the darkness of the night with the whiteness of her body, and after considering her breast and the other parts of her person, and seeing them fair, bethought himself what they should become in a little while, and felt some compassion of her, whilst, on the other hand, the pricks of the flesh assailed him of a sudden, and caused that stand on end which erst lay prone, inciting him to issue forth of his ambush, and go take her, and do his will of her. Between the one and the other he was like to be overcome, but, calling to mind who he was, and what the injury he had suffered, and wherefore, and at whose hands, and he being thereby rekindled into spite and compassion and carnal appetite banished, he abode firm in his purpose, and let her go. The lady, going up onto the tower and turning to the north, began to repeat the words given her by the scholar, who, coming quietly into the tower a while after, little by little removed the ladder, which led to the solar where she was, and after awaited that which she should do and say. Meanwhile, the lady, having 7 times said her conjuration, began to look for the 2 damsels, and so long was her waiting, more by token that she felt it cooler than she could have wished, that she saw the dawn appear, whereupon, woeful that it had not befallen as the scholar had told her, she said in herself, I fear me yonder man hath had a mind to give me a night such as that which I gave him, but, and that be his intent, he hath ill known to avenge himself, for that this night hath not been as long by a third as was his, for by that the cold was of another gate sort. Then, so the day might not surprise her there, she proceeded to seek to go down from the tower, but found the ladder gone, whereupon her courage forsook her, as it were the world had failed beneath her feet, and she fell down a swoon upon the platform of the tower. As soon as her sense returned to her, she fell to weeping piteously and bemoaning herself, and perceiving but too well that this must have been the scholar's doing, she went on to blame herself for having affronted others, and after for having overmuch trusted in him whom she had good reason to believe her enemy, and on this wise she abode a great while. Then, looking if there were no way of descending and seeing none, she fell again to her lamentation, and gave herself up to bitter thought, saying in herself, Alas, unhappy woman! What will be said of thy brothers and kinsfolk and neighbors, and generally of all the people of Florence, when it shall be known that thou hast been found here naked? Thy repute, that hath hitherto been so great, will be known to have been false, and shouldst thou seek to frame lying excuses for thyself, if indeed there are any to be found, the accursed scholar, who knoweth all thine affairs, will not suffer thee lie. O wretched woman, that wilt at one stroke have lost the youth so ill-fatedly beloved and thine own honor. Therewithal she fell into such a passion of woe that she was like to cast herself down from the tower to the ground, but the sun being now risen, and she drawing near to one side of the walls of the tower, to look if any boy should pass with cattle, whom she might send for her maid, it chanced that the scholar, who had slept a while at the foot of a bush, awaking, saw her and she him, whereupon quoth he to her, Good day, madam, are the damsels come yet? The lady, seeing and hearing him, began afresh to weep sore and besought him to come within the tower, so she might speak with him. In this he was courteous enough to comply with her, and she laying herself prone on the platform, and showing only her head at the opening, said, weeping, Assuredly, Rainieri, if I gave thee an ill night, thou hast well avenged thyself of me, for that. Albeit it is July, I have thought to freeze this night, naked as I am, more by token that I have so sore bewept both the trick I put upon thee and mine own folly in believing thee that it is a wonder I have any eyes left in my head. Wherefore I entreat thee, not for the love of me, whom thou hast no call to love, but for the love of thyself, who are a gentleman, that thou be content, for vengeance of the injury I did thee, with that which thou hast already done, and cause fetch me my clothes, and suffer me come down hence, nor seek to take from me that which thou couldst not after restore me, and thou wouldst, to wit, my honor. For, if I took from thee the being with me that night, I can render thee many nights for that one, whensoever it liketh thee. Let this, then, suffice, and let it content thee, as a man of honor, to have availed to avenge thyself, and to have caused me confess it. Seek not to use thy strength against a woman. No glory is it for an eagle to have overcome a dove. Wherefore, for the love of God and thine own honor, have pity on me. The scholar, with stern mind revolving in himself the injury suffered, and seeing her weep and beseech, felt at once both pleasure and annoy, pleasure in the revenge which he had desired more than aught else, and annoy he felt, for that his humanity moved him to compassion of the unhappy woman. However, humanity availing not to overcome the fierceness of his appetite for vengeance, Madame Elena, answered he, if my prayers, which it is true, I knew not to bathe with tears nor to make honeyed, as thou presently knowest to proffer thine, had availed. The night when I was dying of cold in thy snow-filled courtyard, to procure me to be put of thee but a little under cover, it were a light matter to me to hearken now unto thine. But if thou be presently so much more concerned for thine honour than in the past, and it be grievous to thee to abide up there naked, address these thy prayers to him in whose arms thou didst not scruple, that night which thou thyself recallest, to abide naked, hearing me the while go about thy courtyard, chattering with my teeth and trampling the snow, and get thee succour of him, 'cause him fetch thee thy clothes and set thee the ladder, whereby thou mayest descend, and study to inform him with tenderness for thine honour, the which thou hast not scrupled both now and 1,000 other times to imperil for him. Why dost thou not call him to come help thee? To whom pertaineth it more than unto him? Thou art his, and what should he regard or succour, and he regard not neither succour thee? Call him, silly woman that thou art, and prove if the love thou bearest him, and thy wits and his together can avail to deliver thee from my folly, whereof, dallying with him the while, thou questionedst aforetime whether him seemed the greater, my folly or the love thou borest him. Thou canst not now be lavish to me of that which I desire not, nor couldst thou deny it to me, and I desired it. Keep thy nights for thy lover, and it chance that thou come off hence alive, be they thine and his. I had overmuch of one of them, and it sufficeth me to have been once befooled. Again, using thy craft and wheeliness in speech, thou studiest, by extolling me, to gain my goodwill, and callest me a gentleman and a man of honour, thinking thus to cajole me into playing the magnanimous and forbearing to punish thee for thy wickedness. But thy blandishments shall not now darken me the eyes of the understanding, as did thy disloyal promises whilera. I know myself, nor did I learn so much of myself, what while I sojourned at Paris, as thou taughtest me in one single night of thine. But, granted I were indeed magnanimous, thou art none of those towards whom magnanimity should be shown, the issue of punishment, as likewise of vengeance, in the case of wild beasts such as thou art, behoveth to be death. Whereas for human beings that should suffice whereof thou speakest. Wherefore, albeit I am no eagle, knowing thee to be no dove, but a venomous serpent, I mean to pursue thee, as an immemorial enemy, with every hate and all my might, albeit this that I do to thee can scarce properly be styled vengeance, but rather chastisement, inasmuch as vengeance should overpass the offence, and this will not attain thereto, for that, and I sought to avenge myself, considering to what a pass thou broughtest my soul, thy life, should I take it from thee, would not suffice me. No, nor the lives of 100 others such as thou, since, slaying thee, I should but slay a vile, wicked, and worthless troll of a woman. And what a devil more account, setting aside this thy scantling of fair favour, which a few years will mar, filling it with wrinkles, art thou then whatsoever other sorry serving drab? Whereas it was no fault of thine that thou failedst of causing the death of a man of honour, as thou styledst me but now, whose life may yet in one day be of more service to the world than 100,000 of thy like could be what while the world endureth. I will teach thee, then, by means of this annoy that thou sufferest, what it is to flout men of sense, and particularly scholars, and will give thee cause never more, and thou comest off alive, to fall into such a folly. But, and thou hast so great a wish to descend, why dost thou not cast thyself down? On this wise, with God's help, thou wilt, by breaking thy neck, at once deliver thyself from the torment, wherein it seemeth to thee thou art, and make me the joyfullest man in the world. Now I have no more to say to thee. I knew to contrive on such wise that I caused thee go up thither. Do thou now contrive to come down thence, even as thou knewest to befall me. What while the scholar spoke thus, the wretched lady wept without ceasing, and the time lapsed by, the sun still rising high and higher, but when she saw that he was silent, she said, Alack, cruel man! If the accursed night was so grievous to thee, and if my default seemed to thee so heinous a thing that neither my young beauty nor my bitter tears and humble prayers may avail to move thee to any pity, at least let this act of mine alone some little move thee and abate the rigour of thy rancour. To wit, that I but now trusted in thee and discovered to thee mine every secret, opening withal to thy desire a way whereby thou mightest avail to make me cognizant of my sin, more by token that, except I had trusted in thee, thou hadst had no means of availing to take of me that vengeance, which thou seemest to have so ardently desired. For God's sake, leave thine anger and pardon me henceforth. I am ready, so thou wilt but forgive me and bring me down hence, altogether to renounce yonder faithless youth, and to have thee alone to lover and lord, albeit thou decriest my beauty, avouching it short-lived and little worth, knaveless, whatever it be, compared with that of other women. Yet this I know, that, if for naught else, it is to be prized for that it is the desire and pastime and delight of men's youth, and thou art not old. And albeit I am cruelly entreated of thee, I cannot believe withal that thou wouldst fain see me die so unseemly a death as were the casting myself down from this tower, as in desperation, before thine eyes, wherein, and thou was not a liar as thou art since become, I was erst so pleasing. Alack, have ruth on me for God's sake and pities. The sun beginneth to wax hot, and like as the overmuch cold irked me this night, even so doth the heat begin to do me sore annoy. The scholar, who held her in parley for his diversion, answered, Madam, thou hast not presently trusted thine honour in my hands for any love that thou borest me, but to regain him whom thou hast lost, wherefore it meriteth but greater severity. And if thou think that this way alone was apt and opportune unto the vengeance desired of me, thou thinkest foolishly. I had 1,000 others, nay, whilst feigning to love thee, I had spread 1,000 snares about thy feet, and it would not have been long, had this not chanced, ere thou must of necessity have fallen into one of them, nor couldst thou have fallen into any, but it had caused thee greater torment and shame than this present, the which I took, not to ease thee, but to be the quicklier satisfied. And though all else should have failed me, the pen had still been left me, wherewithal I would have written such and so many things of thee, and after such a fashion that, when as thou camest, as thou wouldst have come, to know of them, thou wouldst 1,000 times a day have wished thyself never born. The power of the pen is far greater than they imagine who have not proved it with experience. I swear to God, so may he gladden me to the end of this vengeance that I take of thee, even as he hath made me glad thereof in the beginning, that I would have written such things of thee that, being ashamed, not to say before other folk, but before thine own self, thou shouldst have put out thine own eyes, not to see thyself in the glass, wherefore let not the little rivulet twit the sea with having caused it wax. Of thy love, or that thou be mine, I reck not, as I have already said, a jot, be thou e'en his, and thou may, whose thou wast erst and whom, as I once hated, so at this present I love, having regard unto that which he hath wrought towards thee of late. You women go falling enamoured of young springalds and covet their love, for that you see them somewhat fresher of colour and blacker of beard, and they go erect and jaunty and dance and joust, all which things they have had who are somewhat more in years, aye, and these know that which those have yet to learn. Moreover, you hold them better cavaliers and deem that they fare more miles in a day than men of riper age. Certes, I confess that they jumble a wench's furbelows more briskly, but those more in years, being men of experience, know better where the fleas stick, and little meat and savoury is far and away rather to be chosen than much and insipid. More by token that hard trotting undoth and wearieth folk, how young soever they be, whereas easy-going, though belike it bring one somewhat later to the inn, at the least carrieth him thither unfatigued. You women perceive not, animals without understanding that you are, how much ill lieth hid under this scantling of fair seeming. Young fellows are not content with one woman, nay, as many as they see, so many do they covet, and of so many them seemeth they are worthy, wherefore their love cannot be stable, and of this thou mayst presently of thine own experience bear very true witness. Them seemeth they are worthy to be worshipped and caressed of their mistresses, and they have no greater glory than to vaunt them of those whom they have had, the which default of theirs hath aforetime cast many a woman into the arms of the monks, who tell no tales. Albeit thou sayest that never did any know of thine amours, save thy maid and myself, thou knowest it ill and believest awry, and thou think thus. His quarter talketh well nigh of nothing else, and thine likewise, but most times the last to whose ears such things come is he to whom they pertain. Young men, to boot, despoil you, whereas it is given you of men of riper years. Since, then, thou hast ill chosen, be thou his to whom thou gavest thyself, and leave me, of whom thou madest mock, to others, for that I have found a mistress of much more account than thou, who hath been wise enough to know me better than thou didst. And that thou mayst carry into the other world greater assurance of the desire of mine eyes than meseemeth thou gatherest from my words, do but cast thyself down forthright, and thy soul, being, as I doubt not it will be, straightway received into the arms of the devil, will be able to see if mine eyes be troubled or not at seeing thee fall headlong. But as me doubteth thou wilt not consent to do me so much pleasure, I counsel thee, if the sun begin to scorch thee, remember thee of the cold thou madest me suffer, which an thou mingle with the heat aforesaid, thou wilt without fail feel the sun attempered. The disconsolate lady, seeing that the scholar's words tended to a cruel end, fell again to weeping and said, Harkye, since nothing I can say availeth to move thee to pity of me, let the love move thee, which thou bearest that lady whom thou hast found wiser than I, and of whom thou sayest thou art beloved, and for the love of her pardon me and fetch me my clothes, so I may dress myself and cause me descend hence. Therewith the scholar began to laugh, and seeing that tierce was now past by a good hour, replied, Mary, I know not how to say thee nay, since thou conjurest me by such a lady. Tell me where thy clothes are, and I will go for them, and help thee come down from up yonder. The lady, believing this, was somewhat comforted, and showed him where she had laid her clothes, whereupon he went forth of the tower, and bidding his servant not depart thence, but abide near at hand and watch as most he might that none should enter there till such time as he should return, went off to his friend's house, where he dined at his ease, and after, when as him seemed time, betook himself to sleep, whilst the lady, left upon the tower, albeit some little heartened with fond hope, naveless beyond measure woebegone, sat up, and creeping close to that part of the wall where there was a little shade, fell a-waiting in company of very bitter thoughts. There she abode, now hoping and now despairing of the scholar's return with her clothes, and passing from one thought to another, she presently fell asleep, as one who was overcome of dolour, and who had slept no whit the past night. The sun, which was exceeding hot, being now risen to the meridian, beat full and straight upon her tender and delicate body and upon her head, which was all uncovered, with such force that not only did it burn her flesh, wherever it touched it, but cracked and opened it all over little by little, and such was the pain of the burning that it constrained her to awake, albeit she slept fast. Feeling herself on the roast and moving somewhat, it seemed as if all her scorched skin cracked and clove asunder for the motion, as we see happen with a scorched sheepskin, if any stretch it, and to boot her head irked her so sore that it seemed it would burst, which was no wonder. And the platform of the tower was so burning hot that she could find no resting place there either for her feet or for other what, wherefore, without standing fast, she still removed now hither and now thither, weeping. Moreover, there being not a breath of wind, the flies and gads flocked thither in swarms, and settling upon her cracked flesh, stung her so cruelly that each prick seemed to her a pike stab, wherefore she stinted not to fling her hands about, still cursing herself, her life, her lover, and the scholar. Being thus, by the inexpressible heat of the sun, by the flies and the gads, and likewise by hunger, but much more by thirst, and by 1,000 irksome thoughts, to boot, tortured and stung and pierced to the quick, she started to her feet and addressed herself to look if she might see or hear anyone near at hand, resolved, whatever might betide thereof, to call him and crave aid. But of this resource also had her unfriendly fortune deprived her. The husbandmen were all departed from the fields for the heat, more by token that none had come that day to work their nigh, they being all engaged in threshing out their sheaves beside their houses, wherefore she heard naught but crickets, and saw the Arno, which latter sight, provoking in her desire of its waters, abated not her thirst, but rather increased it. In several places also she saw thickets and shady places, and houses here and there, which were all alike to her in anguish for desire of them. What more shall we say of the ill-starred lady? The sun overhead, and the heat of the platform underfoot, and the stings of the flies and gads on every side, had so entreated her that, whereas with her whiteness she had overcome the darkness of the foregoing night, she was presently grown red as ruddle, and all bescabbed as she was with blood, had seemed to whoso saw her the foulest thing in the world. As she abode on this wise, without aught of hope or counsel, expecting death more than otherwhat, it being now past half none, the scholar, arising from sleep and remembering him of his mistress, returned to the tower, to see what was come of her, and sent his servant, who was yet fasting, to eat. The lady, hearing him, came, all weak and anguishful as she was for the grievous annoy she had suffered, over against the trapdoor, and seating herself there, began, weeping, to say, Indeed, Ranieri, thou hast beyond measure avenged thyself, for, if I made thee freeze in my courtyard by night, thou hast made me roast, nay burn on this tower by day, and die of hunger and thirst to boot. Wherefore I pray thee by the one only God that thou come up hither, and, since my heart suffereth me not, give myself death with mine own hands, give it me thou, for that I desire it more than aught else, such, and so great, are the torments I endure. Or, and thou wilt not do me that favour, let bring me, at the least, a cup of water, so I may wet my mouth, whereunto my tears suffice not, so sore is the drouth and the burning that I have therein. The scholar knew her weakness by her voice, and eke saw, in part, her body all burnt up of the sun, wherefore and for her humble prayers there overcame him a little compassion of her, but none the less he answered, Wicked woman, thou shalt not die by my hands, nay, by thine own shalt thou die, and thou have a mind thereto, and thou shalt have of me as much water for the allaying of thy heat, as I had fire of thee for the comforting of my cold. This much I sore regret that, whereas it behoved me heal the infirmity of my cold with the heat of stinking dung, that of thy heat will be healed with the colth of odoriferous rosewater, and whereas I was like to lose both limbs and life, thou, flayed by this heat, wilt abide fare none otherwise than doth the snake, casting its old skin. Alack, wretch that I am, cried the lady, God give beauties on such wise acquired to those who wish me ill. But thou that art more cruel than any wild beast, how couldst thou have the heart to torture me after this fashion? What more could I expect from thee or any other, if I had done all thy kinsfolk to death with the cruelest torments? Certes, me knoweth not what greater cruelty could be wreaked upon a traitor who had brought a whole city to slaughter than that whereto thou hast exposed me in causing me to be roasted of the sun and devoured of the flies, and withal denying me a cup of water. When as to murderers condemned of justice is oftentimes, as they go to their death, given to drink of wine, so but they ask it. Nay, since I see thee abide firm in thy savage cruelty, and that my sufferance availeth not anywise to move thee, I will resign myself with patience to receive death, so God, whom I beseech to look with equitable eyes upon this thy dealing, may have mercy upon my soul. So saying, she dragged herself painfully to the mid-ward of the platform, despairing to escape alive from so fierce a heat, and not once, but 1,000 times, over and above her other torments, she thought to swoon for thirst, still weeping and bemoaning her ill hap. However, it being now vespers, and it seeming to the scholar he had done enough, he caused his servant take up the unhappy lady's clothes and wrap them in his cloak. Then, betaking himself to her house, he found her maid seated before the door, sad and disconsolate and unknowing what to do, and said to her, Good woman, what is come of thy mistress? Sir, replied she, I know not. I thought to find her this morning in the bed whither meseemed I saw her betake herself yesternight, but I can find her neither there nor otherwhere, and know not what is come of her, wherefore I suffer the utmost concern. But you, sir, can you not tell me aught of her? Quoth he, Would I had had thee together with her whereas I have had her, so I might have punished thee of thy default, like as I have punished her for hers. But assuredly thou shalt not escape from my hands, ere I have so paid thee for thy dealings that thou shalt never more make mock of any man, without remembering thee of me. Then to his servant, Give her the clothes, quoth he, and bid her go to her mistress, and she will. The man did his bidding and gave the clothes to the maid, who, knowing them and hearing what Ranieri said, was sore afraid lest they should have slain her mistress and scarce refrained from crying out. Then, the scholar being done, she set out with the clothes for the tower, weeping the while. Now it chanced that one of the lady's husbandmen had that day lost 2 of his swine, and going in search of them, came, a little after the scholar's departure, to the tower. As he went spying about everywhere if he should see his hogs, he heard the piteous lamentation made of the miserable lady, and climbing up as most he might, cried out, "Who mocketh moan there aloft?" The lady knew her husbandman's voice, and calling him by name, said to him, "For God's sake, fetch me my maid, and contrive so she may come up hither to me." Whereupon quoth the man, recognizing her, "Alack, madam, who hath brought you up yonder? Your maid hath gone seeking you all day, but who had ever thought you could be here?" Then, taking the ladder poles, he set them up in their place, and addressed himself to bind the cross staves thereto with withy bands. Meanwhile, up came the maid, who no sooner entered the tower than, unable any longer to hold her tongue, she fell to crying out, buffeting herself the while with her hands, "Alack, sweet my lady, where are you?" The lady, hearing her, answered as loudly as she might, "O sister mine, I am here aloft. Weep not, but fetch me my clothes quickly." When the maid heard her speak, she was in a manner all recomforted, and with the husbandman's aid, mounting the ladder, which was now well nigh repaired, reached the solar, where, when as she saw her lady lying naked on the ground, all forspent and wan, more as she were a half-burnt log than a human being, she thrust her nails into her own face, and fell a-weeping over her, no otherwise than as she had been dead. The lady besought her for God's sake be silent, and help her dress herself, and learning from her that none knew where she had been save those who had carried her the clothes and the husbandman there present, was somewhat comforted, and prayed them for God's sake never to say aught of the matter to anyone. Then, after much parley, the husbandman, taking the lady in his arms, for that she could not walk, brought her safely without the tower, but the unlucky maid, who had remained behind, descending less circumspectly, made a slip of the foot, and falling from the ladder to the ground, broke her thigh, whereupon she fell a-roaring for the pain, that it seemed a lion. The husbandman, setting the lady down on a plot of grass, went to see what ailed the maid, and finding her with her thigh broken, carried her also to the grass plat, and laid her beside her mistress, who, seeing this befallen in addition to her other troubles, and that she had broken her thigh by whom she looked to have been succored more than by any else, was beyond measure woebegone, and fell a-weeping afresh, and so piteously that not only could the husbandman not avail to comfort her, but himself fell a-weeping likewise. But presently, the sun being now low, he repaired, at the instance of the disconsolate lady, lest the night should overtake them there, to his own house, and there called his wife and 2 brothers of his, who returned to the tower with a plank, and setting the maid thereon, carried her home, whilst he himself, having comforted the lady with a little cold water and kind words, took her up in his arms, and brought her to her own chamber. His wife gave her a wine-sop to eat, and after, undressing her, put her to bed, and they contrived that night to have her and her maid carried to Florence. There the lady, who had shifts and devices great plenty, framed a story of her fashion, altogether out of conformity with that which had passed, and gave her brothers and sisters and everyone else to believe that this had befallen herself and her maid by dint of diabolical bewitchments. Physicians were quickly at hand, who, not without putting her to very great anguish and vexation, recovered the lady of a sore fever, after she had once and again left her skin sticking to the sheets, and on like wise healed the maid of her broken thigh. Wherefore, forgetting her lover, from that time forth she discreetly forbore both from making mock of others and from loving, whilst the scholar, hearing that the maid had broken her thigh, held himself fully avenged and passed on, content, without saying other what thereof. Thus, then, did it befall the foolish young lady of her pranks, for that she thought to fool it with a scholar as she would have done with another, unknowing that scholars, I will not say all, but the most part of them know where the devil keepeth his tail. Wherefore, ladies, beware of making mock of folk, and especially of scholars. The 8th story. 2 men consorting together, one lieth with the wife of his comrade, who, becoming aware thereof, doth with her on such wise that the other is shut up in a chest, upon which he lieth with his wife, he being inside the while. Elena's troubles had been irksome and grievous to the ladies to hear, natheless, for that they deemed them in part justly befallen her, they passed them over with more moderate compassion, albeit they held the scholar to have been terribly stern and obdurate, nay, cruel. But Pampinia being now come to the end of her story, the queen charged Fiametta follow on, who, nothing loath to obey, said, Charming ladies, for that meseemeth the severity of the offended scholar hath some deal distressed you, I deem it well to solace your ruffled spirits with somewhat more diverting, wherefore I purpose to tell you a little story of a young man who received an injury in a milder spirit and avenged it after a more moderate fashion, by which you may understand that, when as a man goeth about to avenge an injury suffered, it should suffice him to give as good as he hath gotten, without seeking to do hurt overpassing the behoof of the feud. You must know, then, that there were once in Siena, as I have understood aforetime, 2 young men in easy enough case and of good city families, whereof one was named Spineloccio Tannina and the other Zeppa di Mino, and they were next-door neighbors in Camalia. These 2 young men still companied together and loved each other, to all appearance, as they had been brothers, or better, and each of them had a very fair wife. It chanced that Spineloccio, by dint of much frequenting Zeppa's house, both when the latter was at home and when he was abroad, grew so private with his wife that he ended by lying with her, and on this wise they abode a pretty while, before any became aware thereof. However, at last, one day, Zeppa being at home, unknown to his wife, Spineloccio came to call him, and the lady said that he was abroad, whereupon the other came straightway up into the house, and finding her in the saloon, and seeing none else there, he took her in his arms and fell to kissing her, and she him. Zeppa, who saw this, made no sign, but abode hidden to see in what the game should result, and presently saw his wife and Spineloccio betake themselves, thus embraced, to a chamber, and there lock themselves in, whereat he was sore angered. But knowing that his injury would not become less for making an outcry, nor for other what, nay, that shame would but wax therefore, he set himself to think what revenge he should take thereof, so his soul might abide content, without the thing being known all about. And him seeming, after long consideration, he had found the means, he abode hidden so long as Spineloccio remained with his wife. As soon as the other was gone away, he entered the chamber, and there finding the lady, who had not yet made an end of adjusting her head veils, which Spineloccio had plucked down in dallying with her, said to her, Wife, what dost thou? Quoth she, Sayest thou not? And Zeppa answered, Indeed, I have seen more than I could wish. So saying, he taxed her with that which had passed, and she, in sore affright, confessed to him, after much parley, that which she could not aptly deny of her familiarity with Spineloccio. Then she began to crave him pardon, weeping, and Zeppa said to her, Harkye, wife, thou hast done ill, and if thou wilt have me pardon it to thee, bethink thee punctually to do that which I shall enjoin thee, which is this. I will have thee bid Spineloccio find an occasion to part company with me tomorrow morning towards Tierce, and come hither to thee. When he is here I will come back, and so soon as thou hearest me, do thou make him enter this chest here, and lock him therein. Then, when thou shalt have done this, I will tell thee what else thou shalt do, and have thou no fear of doing this, for that I promise thee I will do him no manner of hurt. The lady, to satisfy him, promised to do his bidding, and so she did. The morrow come, and Zeppa and Spineloccio being together towards Tierce, the latter, who had promised the lady to be with her at that hour, said to the former, I am to dine this morning with a friend, whom I would not keep waiting for me, wherefore God be with thee. Quoth Zeppa, "It is not dinner time yet awhile," but Spineloccio answered, "No matter, I am to speak with him also of an affair of mine, so that needs must I be there betimes." Accordingly, taking leave of him, he fetched a compass and making for Zeppa's house, entered a chamber with the latter's wife. He had not been there long ere Zeppa returned, whom when the lady heard, feigning to be mightily affrighted, she made him take refuge in the chest, as her husband had bidden her, and locking him therein, went forth of the chamber. Zeppa, coming up, said, "Wife, is it dinner time?" "Aye," answered she, forthright. Quoth he, "Spineloccio is gone to dine this morning with a friend of his and hath left his wife alone. Get thee to the window and call her and bid her come dine with us." The lady, fearing for herself and grown therefore mighty obedient, did as he bade her, and Spinelocccio's wife, being much pressed by her and hearing that her own husband was to dine abroad, came hither. Zeppa made much of her, and whispering his wife be gone into the kitchen, took her familiarly by the hand and carried her into the chamber, wherein no sooner were they come than, turning back, he locked the door within. When the lady saw him do this, she said, "Alack, Zeppa, what meaneth this? Have you then brought me hither for this? Is this the love you bear Spineloccio, and the loyal companionship you practice towards him?" Whereupon quoth Zeppa, drawing near to the chest wherein was her husband locked up, and holding her fast, "Madam, ere thou complainest, hearken to that which I have to say to thee. I have loved and love Spineloccio as a brother, and yesterday, albeit he knoweth it not, I found that the trust one had in him was come to this, that he lieth with my wife even as with thee. Now, for that I love him, I purpose not to take vengeance of him, save on such wise as the offence hath been. He hath had my wife, and I mean to have thee. And thou wilt not, needs must I take him here, and for that I mean not to let this affront go unpunished, I will play him such a turn that neither thou nor he shall ever again be glad." The lady, hearing this and believing what Zeppa said, after many affirmations made her of him, replied, "Zeppa mine, since this vengeance is to fall on me, I am content, so but thou wilt contrive, notwithstanding what we are to do, that I may abide at peace with thy wife, even as I intend to abide with her, notwithstanding this that she hath done to me." "Assuredly," rejoined Zeppa, "I will do it, and to boot, I will give thee a precious and fine jewel as none other thou hast." So saying, he embraced her, then, laying her flat on the chest, there to his heart's content, he solaced himself with her, and she with him. Spineloccio, hearing from within the chest all that Zeppa said his wife's answer, and feeling the morris dance that was toward over his head, was at first so sore despite that him seemed he should die, and but that he stood in fear of Zeppa, he had rated his wife finely. Shut up as he was. However, bethinking himself that the offence had begun with him, and that Zeppa was in his right to do as he did and had indeed borne himself towards him humanely and like a comrade, he presently resolved in himself to be, and he would, more than ever his friend. Zeppa, having been with the lady so long as it pleased him, dismounted from the chest, and she asking for the promised jewel, he opened the chamber door and called his wife, who said naught else than, "Madam, you have given me a loaf for my bannock." And this she said laughing. To her quoth Zeppa, "Open this chest." Accordingly she opened it, and therein Zeppa showed the lady her husband, saying, "Here is the jewel I promise thee." It were hard to say which was the more abashed of the twain, Spineloccio, seeing Zeppa and knowing that he knew what he had done, or his wife, seeing her husband and knowing that he had both heard and felt that which she had done over his head. But Spineloccio, coming forth of the chest, said, without more parley, "Zeppa, we are quits, wherefore it is well, as thou saidst but now to my wife, that we be still friends as we were, and that, since there is nothing unshared between us two but our wives, we have these also in common." Zeppa was content, and they all four dined together in the utmost possible harmony, and thenceforward each of the two ladies had 2 husbands and each of the latter 2 wives, without ever having any strife or grudge anent the matter. The 9th story. Master Simone the physician, having been induced by Bruno and Buffalmacco to repair to a certain place by night, there to be made a member of a company that goeth a roving, is cast by Buffalmacco into a trench full of ordure, and there left. After the ladies had chatted a while over the community of wives practised by the two Sienese, the queen, with whom alone it rested to tell, so she would not do Dioneo an unright, began on this wise: Right well, lovesome ladies, did Spineloccio deserve the cheat put upon him by Zeppa, wherefore meseemeth he is not severely to be blamed, as Pampinia sought a while ago to show, who putteth the cheat on those who go seeking it or deserve it. Now Spineloccio deserved it, and I mean to tell you of one who went seeking it for himself. Those who tricked him I hold not to be blameworthy, but rather commendable, and he to whom it was done was a physician, who, having set out for Bologna a sheep's head, returned to Florence all covered with miniver. As we see daily, our townsmen return hither from Bologna, this a judge, that a physician, and a third a notary, tricked out with robes long and large, and scarlets, and minivers, and store of other fine paraphernalia, and make a mighty brave show, to which how far the effects conform we may still see all day long. Among the rest a certain Master Simone de Villa, richer in inherited goods than in learning, returned hither, no great while since, a doctor of medicine, according to his own account, clad all in scarlet, and with a great miniver hood, and took a house in the street, which we call nowadays the Via del Cocomero. This said Master Simone, being thus newly returned, as hath been said, had, amongst other his notable customs, a trick of asking whosoever was with him, who was no matter what man he saw pass in the street, and as if of the doings and fashions of men he should compound the medicines he gave his patients, he took note of all, and laid them all up in his memory. Amongst others on whom it occurred to him more particularly to cast his eyes were two painters of whom it hath already twice today been discoursed, namely, Bruno and Buffalmacco, who were neighbors of his, and still went in company. Him seeming they recked less of the world, and lived more merrily than other folk, as was indeed the case, he questioned divers persons of their condition, and hearing from all that they were poor men and painters, he took it into his head that it might not be they lived so blithely of their poverty, but concluded, for that he had heard they were shrewd fellows, that they must needs derive very great profits from some source unknown to the general. Wherefore he was taken with a desire to clap up an acquaintance, and he might, with them both, or at least with one of them, and succeeded in making friends with Bruno. The latter, perceiving, after he had been with him a few times, that the physician was a very jackass, began to give himself the finest time in the world with him, and to be hugely diverted with his extraordinary humours, whilst Master Simone in like manner took a marvellous delight in his company. After a while, having sundry times bidden him to dinner, and thinking himself entitled in consequence to discourse familiarly with him, he discovered to him the wonderment that he felt at him and Buffalmacco, how, being poor men, they lived so merrily, and besought him to apprise him how they did. Bruno, hearing this talk from the physician, and him seeing the question was one of his wonted witless impertinences, fell a-laughing in his sleeve, and, bethinking himself to answer him according as his folly deserved, said, Doctor, there are not many whom I would tell how we do, but you I shall not scruple to tell, for that you are a friend, and I know you will not repeat it to any. It is true we live, my friend and I, as merrily and as well as it appeareth to you, nay, more so, albeit neither of our craft nor of revenues we derive from any possessions might we have enough to pay for the very water we consume. Yet I would not, for all that, have you think that we go steal, nay, we go a-roving, and thence, without hurt unto any, we get us all to which we have a mind or for which we have occasion, hence the merry life you see us lead. The physician, hearing this and believing it, without knowing what it was, marveled exceedingly, and forthright conceiving an ardent desire to know what manner of thing this going a-roving might be, besought him very urgently to tell him, affirming that he would assuredly never discover it to any. Alack, doctor, cried Bruno, what is this you ask me? This you would know is too great a secret and a thing to undo me and drive me from the world, nay, to bring me into the mouth of the Lucifer of San Gallo, should any come to know it. But so great is the love I bear your right worshipful pumpkin-headship of Legnaja and the confidence I have in you that I can deny you nothing you would have, wherefore I will tell it you, on condition that you swear to me by the cross at Monteswan, never, as you have promised, to tell it to anyone. The physician declared that he would never repeat what he should tell him, and Bruno said, You must know, then, honey doctor mine, that not long since there was in this city a great master in necromancy, who was called Michael Scott, for that he was of Scotland, and who received the greatest hospitality from many gentlemen, of whom few are nowadays alive, wherefore, being minded to depart hence, he left them, at their instant prayers, 2 of his ablest disciples, whom he enjoined still to hold themselves in readiness to satisfy every wish of the gentleman who had so worshipfully entertained him. These 2, then, freely served the aforesaid gentleman in certain amours of theirs and other small matters, and afterward, the city and the usages of the folk pleasing them, they determined to abide there always. Accordingly, they contracted great and strait friendship with certain of the towfolk, regarding not who they were, whether gentle or simple, rich or poor, but solely if they were men comfortable to their own usances. And to pleasure these who were thus become their friends, they founded a company of maybe 25 men, who should foregather twice at the least in the month in some place appointed of them, where being assembled, each should tell them his desire, which they would forthright accomplish unto him for that night. Buffalmacco and I, having an especial friendship and intimacy with these 2, were put of them on the roll of the aforesaid company, and are still thereof. And I may tell you that, what time it chanceth that we assemble together, it is a marvellous thing to see the hangings about the saloon where we eat, and the tables spread on royal wise, and the multitude of noble and goodly servants, as well female as male, at the pleasure of each one who is of the company, and the basins and ewers and flagons and goblets, and the vessels of gold and silver, wherein we eat and drink, more by token of the many and various viands that are set before us, each in its season, according to that which each one desireth. I could never avail to set out to you what and how many are the sweet sounds of innumerable instruments, and the songs full of melody that are heard there. Nor might I tell you how much wax is burned at these suppers, nor what and how many are the confections that are consumed there, nor how costly are the wines that are drunken. But I would not have you believe, good saltless pumpkin-head mine, that we abide there in this habit, and with these clothes that you see us wear every day. Nay, there is none of us of so little account, but would seem to you an emperor. So richly are we adorned with vestments of price and fine things. But over all the other pleasures that be there is that of fair ladies, who, so one but will it, are incontinent brought thither from the 4 quarters of the world. There might you see the sovereign lady of the rascal roughs, the queen of the Basques, the wife of the Soldan, the empress of the Uzbeg Tartars, the driggle-draggle tail of Norway, the Mollagreen of Flapdudland, and the Mad Kate of Woolgather Green. But why need I enumerate them to you? There be all the queens in the world, even, I may say, to the Sir Reverence of Prester John, who hath his horns a middleward his arse. See you now? There, after we have drunken and eaten confections and walked a dance or 2, each lady betacketh herself to her bedchamber with him at whose instance she hath been brought thither. And you must know that these bedchambers are a very paradise to behold, so goodly they are. Aye, and they are no less odoriferous than are the spice-boxes of your shop, when as you let Bray come and seed. And therein are beds that would seem to you goodlier than that of the Doge of Venice, and in these they betake themselves to rest. Marry, what a working of the treadles, what a hauling to of the battens to make the cloth close, these weaverses keep up, I will e'en leave you to imagine, but of those who fare best, to my seeming, are Buffalmacco and myself. For that he most times letteth come thither the Queen of France for himself, whilst I send for her of England, the which are 2 of the fairest ladies in the world, and we have known so to do that they have none other eye in their head than us. Wherefore you may judge for yourself if we can and should live and go more merrily than other men, seeing we have the love of 2 such queens, more by token that, whenas we would have 1,000 or 2,000 florins of them, we get them not. This, then, we commonly style going a roving, for that, like as the rovers take every man's good, even so do we, save that we are in this much different from them that they never restore that which they take, whereas we return it again, whenas we have used it. Now, worthy Doctor mine, you have heard what it is we call going a roving, but how strictly this requireth to be kept secret you can see for yourself, and therefore I say no more to you nor pray you thereof. The physician, whose science reached no farther belike than the curing children of the scald head, gave as much credit to Bruno's story as had been due to the most manifest truth, and was inflamed with as great desire to be received into that company as might be kindled in any for the most desirable thing in the world. Wherefore he made answer to him that assuredly it was no marvel if they went merry, and hardly constrained himself to defer requesting him to bring him to be there until such time, as, having done him further hospitality, he might with more confidence proffer his request to him. Accordingly, reserving this unto a more favorable season, he proceeded to keep straighter usance with Bruno, having him morning and evening to eat with him, and showing him an inordinate affection. And indeed so great and so constant was this their commerce that it seemed as if the physician could not nor knew how to live without the painter. The latter, finding himself in good case, so he might not appear ungrateful for the hospitality shown him, had painted Master Simone a picture of Lent in his saloon, besides an Agnus Dei at the entering in of his chamber and a chamber pot over the street door, so those who had occasion for his advice might know how to distinguish him from the others, and in a little gallery he had depictured him the battle of the rats and the cats, which appeared to the physician a very fine thing. Moreover, he said whiles to him, whenas he had not supper with him overnight, I was at the society yesternight, and being a trifle tired of the Queen of England, I caused fetch me the dolidoxy of the Grand Cham of Tartary. What meaneth dolidoxy? Asked Master Simone. I do not understand these names. Marry, Doctor mine, replied Bruno, I marvel not thereat, for I have right well heard that Porcograsso and Vanacina say naught thereof. Quoth the physician, Thou meanest Ippocrasso and Avicenna. I faith, answered Bruno, I know not. I understand your names as ill as you do mine, but dolidoxy in the Grand Cham's lingo meaneth as much as to say empress in our tongue. Egad, you would think her a plaguey fine woman. I dare well say she would make you forget your drugs and your clysters and all your plasters. On this wise he bespoke him at one time and another, to enkindle him the more, till one night, what while it chanced my lord doctor held the light to Bruno, who was in act to paint the battle of the rats and the cats, the former, him seeming he had now well taken him with his hospitalities, determined to open his mind to him, and accordingly, they being alone together, he said to him, God knoweth, Bruno, there is no one alive for whom I would do everything as I would for thee. Indeed, shouldst thou bid me go hence to Peretula, methinketh it would take little to make me go thither, wherefore I would not have thee marvel if I require thee of somewhat familiarly and with confidence. As thou knowest, it is no great while since thou bespokest me of the fashions of your merry company, wherefore so great a longing hath taken me to be one of you that never did I desire aught so much. Nor is this my desire without cause, as thou shalt see, if ever it chance that I be of your company, for I give thee leave to make mock of me, and I cause not come thither the finest serving wench thou ever setst eyes on. I saw her but last year at Cacavincigli, and wish her all my weal, and by the body of Christ, I had e'en given her 50 Bolognese groats, so she would but have consented to me, but she would not. Wherefore, as most I may, I prithee teach me what I must do to avail to be of your company, and do thou also do, and contrive, so I may be thereof. Indeed, you will have in me a good and loyal comrade, aye, and a worshipful. Thou sayest, to begin with, what a fine man I am, and how well I am set up on my legs. Aye, and I have a face as it were a rose, more by token that I am a doctor of medicine, such as I believe you have none among you. Moreover, I know many fine things and goodly canzonets. Marry, I will sing you one. And incontinent he fell a-singing. Bruno had so great a mind to laugh that he was like to burst, However, he contained himself, and the physician, having made an end of his song, said, "How deemedst thou thereof?" "Certes," answered Bruno, "there's no Jew's harp but would lose with you, so archigothically do you caterwarble it." Quoth Master Simone, "I tell thee thou wouldst never have believed it, hadst thou not heard me." "Certes," replied Bruno, "you say sooth." And the physician went on, "I know store of others, but let that be for the present. Such as thou sayest me, my father was a gentleman, albeit he abode in the country, and I myself come by my mother of the Vallecchio family. Moreover, as thou mayst have seen, I have the finest books and gowns of any physician in Florence. Cock's faith, I have a gown that stood me, all reckoned, in nigh upon £100 of doits, more than 60 years ago. Wherefore I pray thee as most I may, to bring me to be of your company, and by cock's faith, an thou do it, thou mayst be as ill as thou wilt. For I will never take a farthing of thee for my services." Bruno, hearing this, and the physician seeming to him a greater numbskull than ever, said, "Doctor, hold the light of thought more this way, and take patience till I have made these rats their tales, and after I will answer you." The tales being finished, Bruno made believe that the physician's request was exceeding irksome to him, and said, "Doctor mine, these be great things you would do for me, and I acknowledge it. Nevertheless, that which you ask of me, little as it may be for the greatness of your brain, is yet to me a very grave matter, nor know I anyone in the world for whom, it being in my power, I would do it, and I did it not for you. Both because I love you as it behoveth, and on account of your words, which are seasoned with so much wit that they would draw the straps out of a pair of boots, much more me from my purpose. For the more I consort with you, the wiser you appear to me. And I may tell you this, to boot, that, though I had none other reason, yet do I wish you well, for that I see you enamored of so fair a creature as is she of whom you speak. But this much I will say to you, I have no such power in this matter as you suppose, and cannot therefore do for you that which were behoving. However, and you will promise me, upon your solemn and surbated faith, to keep it me secret, I will tell you the means you must use, and meseemeth certain that, with such fine books and other gear as you tell me you have, you will gain your end." Quoth the doctor, "Say on in all assurance. I see thou art not yet well acquainted with me, and knowest not how I can keep a secret. There be few things indeed that Messer Guasparulo de Salcedo did, when as he was judge of the provostry at Forlimpopoli, but he sent to tell me, for that he found me so good a secret keeper. And wilt thou judge an I say sooth? I was the first man whom he told that he was to marry Bergamina. Sayest thou now?" "Marry, then," rejoined Bruno, "all is well. If such a man trusted in you, I may well do so. The course you must take is on this wise. You must know that we still have to this our company a captain and 2 counselors, who are changed from 6 months to 6 months, and without fail, at the first of the month, Buffalmacco will be captain and I shall be counselor, for so it is settled. Now whoso is captain can do much by way of procuring whomsoever he will to be admitted into the company, wherefore meseemeth you should seek, inasmuch as you may, to gain Buffalmacco's friendship and do him honor. He is a man, seeing you so wise, to fall in love with you incontinent, and when as with your wit, and with these fine things you have, you shall have some deal ingratiated yourself with him, you can make your request to him, he will not know how to say you nay. I have already bespoken him of you, and he wisheth you all the weal in the world, and when as you shall have done this, leave me do with him." Quoth the physician, "That which thou counsellest liketh me well. Indeed, and he be a man who delighteth in men of learning and talketh, but with me a little, I will engage to make him go still seeking my company, for that, as for wit, I have so much thereof that I could stock a city withal and yet abide exceeding wise." This being settled, Bruno imparted the whole matter to Buffalmacco, wherefore it seemed to the latter 1,000 years, till they should come to do that which this arch-zany went seeking. The physician, who longed beyond measure to go a-roving, rested not till he made friends with Buffalmacco, which he easily succeeded in doing, and therewithal he fell to giving him, and Bruno with him, the finest suppers and dinners in the world. The two painters, like the accommodating gentlemen they were nothing loath to engage with him, and having once tasted the excellent wines and fat capons and other good things galore, with which he plied them, stuck very close to him and ended by quartering themselves upon him without awaiting overmuch invitation, still declaring that they would not do this for another. Presently, when as it seemed to him time, the physician made the same request to Buffalmacco as he had made Bruno aforetime, whereupon Buffalmacco feigned himself sore chagrined, and made a great outcry against Bruno, saying, I vow to the high God of Passignano that I can scarce withhold myself from giving thee such a clout over the head as should cause thy nose drop to thy heels, traitor that thou art, for none other than thou hath discovered these matters to the doctor. Master Simone did his utmost to excuse Bruno, saying and swearing that he had learned the thing from another quarter, and after many of his wise words, he succeeded in pacifying Buffalmacco, whereupon the latter turned to him and said, Doctor mine, it is very evident that you have been at Bologna and have brought back a close mouth to these parts, and I tell you moreover that you have not learnt your ABC on the apple as many blockheads are fain to do, nay, you have learned it aright on the pumpkin that is so long, and if I mistake not, you were baptized on a Sunday. And albeit Bruno hath told me that you studied medicine there, meseemeth you studied rather to learn to catch men, the which you, with your wit and your fine talk, know better to do than any man I ever set eyes on. Here the physician took the words out of his mouth and breaking in, said to Bruno, What a thing it is to talk and consort with learned men! Who would so have quickly apprehended every particular of my intelligence as hath this worthy man? Thou didst not half so speedily become aware of my value as he, but, at the least, that which I told thee, when as thou saidst to me that Buffalmacco delighted in learned men, seemeth it to thee I have done it. I hast thou, replied Bruno, and better. Then said the doctor to Buffalmacco, Thou wouldst have told another tale, hadst thou seen me at Bologna, where there was none, great or small, doctor or scholar, but wished me all the weal in the world. So well did I know to content them all with my discourse and my wit. And what is more, I never said a word there, but I made every one laugh, so hugely did I please them, and when as I departed thence, they all set up the greatest lament in the world, and would all have had me remain there. Nay, to such a pass came it for that I should abide there, that they would have left it to me alone to lecture on medicine to as many students as were there, but I would not. For that I was e'en minded to come hither to certain very great heritages which I have here and which have still been in my family, and so I did. Quoth Bruno to Buffalmacco, How deemest thou? Thou believedst me not, when as I told it thee. By the evangels, there is not a leech in these parts who is versed in ass's water to compare with this one, and assuredly thou wouldst not find another of him from here to Paris gates. Marry, hold yourself henceforth, if you can, from doing that which he will. Quoth Master Simone, Bruno saith sooth, but I am not understood here. You Florentines are somewhat dull of wit, but I would have you see me among the doctors, as I am used to be. Verily, doctor, said Buffalmacco, you are far wiser than I could ever have believed. Wherefore, to speak to you as it should be spoken to scholars such as you are, I tell you, cut and slash fashion, I will without fail procure you to be of our company. After this promise the physician redoubled in his hospitalities to the two rogues, who enjoyed themselves at his expense, what while they crammed him with the greatest extravagances in the world and fooled him to the top of his bent, promising him to give him to Mistress the Countess of Jakes, who was the fairest creature to be found in all the back settlements of the human generation. The physician inquired who this countess was, whereto quoth Buffalmacco, Good my seed pumpkin, she is a very great lady, and there be few houses in the world wherein she hath not some jurisdiction. To say nothing of others, the minor friars themselves render her tribute to the sound of kettle-drums. And I can assure you that, whenas she goeth abroad, she mocketh herself well felt, albeit she abideth for the most part shut up. Nailess, it is no great while since she passed by your door, one night that she repaired to the Arno, to wash her feet and take the air a little, but her most continual abiding place is in Draughthouseland. There go oft times about store of her sergeants, who all in token of her supremacy bear the staff and the plummet, and of her barons many are everywhere to be seen, such as Sir Reverence of the Gate, Goodman Turd, Hardcake, Squitter Breach, and others, who methinketh are your familiars, albeit you call them not presently to mind. In the soft arms, then, of this great lady, leaving be her of Cacavincigli, we will, an expectation cheat us not, bestow you. The physician, who had been born and bred at Bologna, understood not their canting terms, and accordingly avouched himself well pleased with the lady in question. Not long after this talk, the painters brought him news that he was accepted to member of the company, and the day being come before the night appointed for their assembly, he had them both to dinner. When they had dined, he asked them what means it behoved him take to come thither, whereupon quoth Buffalmacco, Look you, doctor, it behoveth you of plenty of assurance, for that, and you be not mighty resolute, you may chance to suffer hindrance and do us very great hurt, and in what it behoveth you to approve yourself, very stout-hearted you shall hear. You must find means to be this evening at the season of the first sleep on one of the raised tombs which have been lately made without Santa Maria Novella, with one of your finest gowns on your back, so you may make an honorable figure for your first appearance before the company, and also because, according to what was told us, we were not thereafter, the Countess is minded, for that you are a man of gentle birth, to make you a knight of the Bath at her own proper costs and charges, and there you must wait till there cometh for you he whom we shall send. And so you may be apprised of everything, there will come for you a black horned beast, not over big, which will go capering about the piazza before you and making a great whistling and bounding, to terrify you, but when he seeth that you are not to be daunted, he will come up to you quietly. Then do you, without any fear, come down from the tomb and mount the beast, naming neither God nor the saints, and as soon as you are settled on his back, you must cross your hands upon your breast, in the attitude of obeisance, and touch him no more. He will then set off softly and bring you to us, but if you call upon God or the saints or show fear, I must tell you that he may chance to cast you off or strike you into some place where you are like to stink for it. Wherefore, in your heart misgive you, and unless you can make sure of being mighty resolute, come not thither, for you would but do us a mischief, without doing yourself any good. Quoth the physician, I see you know me not yet. Maybe you judge of me by my gloves and long gown. If you knew what I did aforetimes at Bologna nights, when I went a-wenching whiles with my comrades, you would marvel. Cock's faith, there was such and such a night when, one of them refusing to come with us, more by token that she was a scurvy little baggage, no higher than my fist, I dealt her, to begin with, good store of cuffs, then, taking her up bodily, I dare say I carried her a crossbow shot and wrought so that needs must she come with us. Another time I remember me that, without any other in my company than a serving man of mine, I passed yonder alongside the cemetery of the minor friars a little after the Ave Maria, albeit there had been a woman buried there that very day, and felt no whit of fear, wherefore misdoubt you not of this, for I am but too stout of heart and lusty. Moreover, I tell you that, to do you credit at my coming thither, I will don my gown of scarlet, wherein I was admitted doctor, and we shall see if the company rejoice not at my sight, and I be not made captain out of hand. You shall e'en see how the thing will go, once I am there, since, without having yet set eyes on me, this countess hath fallen so enamoured of me that she is minded to make me a knight of the Bath. It may be knighthood will not sit so ill on me, nor shall I be at a loss to carry it off with worship. Marry, only leave me do. You say very well, answered Buffalmacco, but look you leave us not in the lurch, and not come, or not be found at the trysting place, whenas we shall send for you. And this I say for that the weather is cold, and you gentlemen doctors are very careful of yourselves thereanent. God forbid, cried Master Simone. I am none of your chilly ones. I reck not of the cold, seldom or never, whenas I rise of a night for my bodily occasions, as a man will by times, do I put me on more than my fur gown over my doublet. Wherefore I will certainly be there. Thereupon they took leave of him, and when as it began to grow towards night, Master Simone contrived to make some excuse or other to his wife, and secretly got out his fine gown. Then, when as it seemed to him time, he donned it and betook himself to Santa Maria Novella, where he mounted one of the aforesaid tombs, and huddling himself up on the marble, for that the cold was great, he proceeded to wait the coming of the beast. Meanwhile Buffalmacco, who was tall and robust of his person, made shift to have one of those masks that were wont to be used for certain games which are not held nowadays, and donning a black fur pelisse, inside out, arrayed himself therein on such wise that he seemed a very bear, save that his mask had a devil's face and was horned. Thus accoutred, he betook himself to the new piazza of Santa Maria, Bruno following him to see how the thing should go. As soon as he perceived that the physician was there, he fell a capering and caracoling, and made a terrible great blustering about the piazza, whistling and howling and bellowing as he were possessed of the devil. When Master Simone, who was more fearful than a woman, heard and saw this, every hair of his body stood on end, and he fell a trembling all over, and it was now he had liefer been at home than there. Nevertheless, since he was e'en there, he enforced himself to take heart, so overcome was he with desire to see the marvels whereof the painters had told him. After Buffalmacco had raged about a while, as hath been said, he made a show of growing pacified, and coming up to the tomb whereon was the physician, stood stock-still. Master Simone, who was all a tremble for fear, knew not what to do, whether to mount or abide where he was. However, at last, fearing that the beast should do him a mischief, and he mounted him not, he did away the first fear with the second, and coming down from the tomb, mounted on his back, saying softly, "God aid me." Then he settled himself as best he might, and, still trembling in every limb, crossed his hands upon his breast, as it had been enjoined him, whereupon Buffalmacco set off at an amble towards Santa Maria della Scala, and going on all fours, brought him hard by the nunnery of Ripoll. In those days there were dykes in that quarter, wherein the tillers of the neighbouring lands let empty the jakes, to manure their fields withal, whereto when as Buffalmacco came nigh, he went up to the brink of one of them, and, taking the opportunity, laid hold of one of the physician's legs, and jerking him off his back, pitched him clean in, head foremost. Then he fell a-snorting and snarling and capering, and raged about a while, after which he made off alongside Santa Maria della Scala till he came to Allhallows Fields. There he found Bruno, who had taken to flight, for that he was unable to restrain his laughter, and with him, after they had made merry together at Master Simone's expense, he addressed himself to see from afar what the bemoiled physician should do. My Lord Leech, finding himself in that abominable place, struggled to arise, and strove as best he might to win forth thereof, and after falling in again and again, now here and now there, and swallowing some drams of the filth, he at last succeeded in making his way out of the dyke, in the woefulest of plights, bewrayed from head to foot, and leaving his bonnet behind him. Then, having wiped himself as best he might with his hands, and knowing not what other course to take, he returned home, and knocked till it was opened to him. Hardly was he entered, stinking as he did, and the door shut again, ere up came Bruno and Buffalmacco to hear how he should be received of his wife, and standing hearkening, they heard the lady give him the foulest rating was ever given poor devil, saying, "Good lack, what a pickle thou art in! Thou hast been gallanting it to some other woman, and must needs seek to cut a figure with thy gown of scarlet. What, was not I enough for thee? Why, man alive, I could suffice to a whole people, let alone thee. Would God they had choked thee, like as they cast thee whereas thou deservedst to be thrown. Here's a fine physician for you, to have a wife of his own, and go a-gaddying o' nights after other folks' womankind." And with these and many other words of the same fashion, she gave not over tormenting him till midnight, what while the physician let wash himself from head to foot. Next morning up came Bruno and Buffalmacco, who had painted all their flesh under their clothes with livid blotches, such as beatings used to make, and, entering the physician's house, found him already arisen. Accordingly they went into him, and found the whole place full of stench, for that they had not yet been able so to clean everything that it should not stink there. Master Simone, seeing them enter, came to meet them and bade God give them good day, whereto the two rogues, as they had agreed beforehand, replied with an angry air, saying, That say we not to you, nay, rather, we pray God give you so many ill years that you may die a dog's death, as the most disloyal man and the vilest traitor alive, for it was no thanks to you that, whereas we studied to do you pleasure and worship, we were not slain like dogs. As it is, thanks to your disloyalty, we have gotten so many buffets this past night that an ass would go to Rome for less, without reckoning that we have gone in danger of being expelled the company into which we had taken order for having you received. And you believe us not, look at our bodies and see how they have fared. Then, opening their clothes in front, they showed him, by an uncertain light, their breasts all painted, and covered them up again in haste. The physician would have excused himself and told of his mishaps, and how and where he had been cast, but Buffalmacco said, would he had thrown you off the bridge into the Arno. Why did you call on God and the saints? Were you not forewarned of this? By God his faith, replied the physician, I did it not. How? Cried Buffalmacco. You did not call on them? Egad, you did it again and again, for our messenger told us that you shook like a reed and knew not where you were. Marry, for the nonce you have befooled us finely, but never again shall any one serve us thus, and we will yet do you such honor thereof as you merit. The physician fell to craving pardon and conjuring them for God's sake not to dishonor him, and studied to appease them with the best words he could command. And if aforetime he had entreated them with honor, from that time forth he honored them yet more and made much of them, entertaining them with banquets and other what, for fear lest they should publish his shame. Thus, then, as you have heard, is sense taught to whoso hath learned no great store thereof at Bologna. The 10th story. A certain woman of Sicily artfully despoileth a merchant of that which he had brought to Palermo, but he, making believe to have returned thither with much greater plenty of merchandise than before, borroweth money of her and leaveth her water and tow in payment. How much the Queen's story in divers places made the ladies laugh, it needed not to ask. Suffice it to say that there was none of them to whose eyes the tears had not come a dozen times for excess of laughter, but after it had an end, Dioneo, knowing that it was come to his turn to tell, said, Gracious ladies, it is a manifest thing that sleights and devices are the more pleasing, the subtler the trickster who is thereby artfully outwitted. Wherefore, albeit you have related very fine stories, I mean to tell you one, which should please you more than any other that hath been told upon the same subject, inasmuch as she who was cheated was a greater mistress of the art of cheating others than was any of the men or women who were cozened by those of whom you have told. There used to be, and belike is yet, a custom in all maritime places which have a port, that all merchants who come thither with merchandise, having unloaded it, should carry it all into a warehouse, which is in many places called a custom house, kept by the commonalty or by the lord of the place. There they give unto those who are deputed to that end a note in writing of all their merchandise and the value thereof, and they thereupon make over to each merchant a storehouse, wherein he layeth up his goods under lock and key. Moreover, the said officers enter in the book of the customs, to each merchant's credit, all his merchandise, causing themselves after he paid their dues of the merchants, whether for all his said merchandise, or for such part thereof as he withdraweth from the custom house. By this book of the customs the brokers mostly inform themselves of the quality and the quantity of the goods that are in bond there, and also who are the merchants that own them, and with these latter, as occasion serveth them, they treat of exchanges and barters and sales and other transactions. This usance, amongst many other places, was current at Palermo in Sicily, where likewise there were and are yet many women, very fair of their person, but sworn enemies to honesty, who would be and are by those who know them not held great ladies and passing virtuous, and who, being given not to shave, but altogether to flay men, no sooner be a merchant there than they inform themselves by the book of the customs of that which he hath there, and how much he can do, after which by there. Lovesome and engaging fashions, and with the most dulcet words, they study to allure the said merchants and draw them into the snare of their love, and many an one have they aforetime lured thereinto, from whom they have wiled great part of their merchandise. Nay, many have they despoiled of all, and of these there be some who have left goods and ship and flesh and bones in their hands, so sweetly hath the barbarous known to ply the razor. It chanced, not long since, that there came thither, sent by his masters, one of our young Florentines, by name Niccolò de Signano, though more commonly called Salabetto, with as many woolen cloths, left on his hands from the Salerno fair, as might be worth some 500 gold florins, which having given the custom-house officers the invoice thereof, he laid up in a magazine and began, without showing overmuch haste to dispose of them, to go by times a-pleasuring about the city. He being of a fair complexion and yellow-haired, and withal very sprightly and personable, it chanced that one of these same barbaresses, who styled herself Madame Bianco-Fire, having heard somewhat of his affairs, cast her eyes on him, which he perceiving and taking her for some great lady, concluded that he pleased her for his good looks, and bethought himself to order this amour with the utmost secrecy, wherefore, without saying aught thereof to any, he fell to passing and repassing before her house. She, noting this, after she had for some days well enkindled him with her eyes, making believe to languish for him, privily dispatched to him one of her women, who was a past mistress in the procuring art, and who, after much parley, told him, well nigh with tears in her eyes, that he had so taken her mistress with his comeliness and his pleasing fashions that she could find no rest day or night, wherefore, when as it pleased him, she desired, more than aught else, to avail to foregather with him, privily in a bagnio. Then, pulling a ring from her pouch, she gave it to him on the part of her mistress. Salabetto, hearing this, was the joyfullest man that was I, and taking the ring, rubbed it against his eyes and kissed it, after which he set it on his finger and replied to the good woman that, if Madame Bianco-Fire loved him, she was well requited it, for that he loved her more than his proper life, and was ready to go wheresoever it should please her and at any hour. The messenger returned to her mistress with this answer, and it was appointed Salabetto out of hand at what bagnio he should expect her on the ensuing day after vespers. Accordingly, without saying aught of the matter to any, he punctually repaired thither at the hour appointed him and found the bagnio taken by the lady, nor had he waited long ere there came two slave girls laden with gear and bearing on their heads, the one a fine large mattress of cotton wool, and the other a great basket full of gear. The mattress they set on a bedstead in one of the chambers of the bagnio, and spread thereon a pair of very fine sheets, laced with silk, together with a counterpane of snow-white cypress buckram and two pillows wonder curiously wrought. Then, putting off their clothes, they entered the bath and swept it all and washed it excellent well. Nor was it long ere the lady herself came thither, with other two slave girls, and accosted Salabetto with the utmost joy. Then, as first she had commodity, after she had both clipped and kissed him amain, heaving the heaviest sighs in the world, she said to him, I know not who could have brought me to this pass, other than thou. Thou hast kindled a fire in my vitals, little dog of a Tuscan. Then, at her instance, they entered the bath, both naked, and with them two of the slave girls, and there, without letting any else lay a finger on him, she with her own hands washed Salabetto all wonder well with musk and clove-scented soap, after which she let herself be washed and rubbed of the slave girls. This done, the latter brought two very white and fine sheets, whence came so great a scent of roses that everything there seemed roses, in one of which they wrapped Salabetto, and in the other the lady, and taking them in their arms, carried them both to the bed prepared for them. There, when as they had left sweating, the slave girls did them loose from the sheets wherein they were wrapped, and they abode naked in the others, whilst the girls brought out of the basket wonder goodly casting bottles of silver, full of sweet waters, rose and jessamine and orange and citron flower scented, and sprinkled them all therewith, after which boxes of sacades and wines of great price were produced, and they refreshed themselves awhile. It seemed to Salabetto as he were in paradise, and he cast 1,000 glances at the lady, who was certes very handsome, him seeming each hour was 100 years till the slave girls should be gone, and he should find himself in her arms. Presently, at her commandment, the girls departed the chamber, leaving a flambeau alight there, whereupon she embraced Salabetto and he her, and they abode together a great while, to the exceeding pleasure of the Florentine, to whom it seemed she was all afire for love of him. When as it seemed to her time to rise, she called the slave girls, and they clad themselves. Then they recruited themselves some deal with a second collation of wine and sweetmeats, and washed their hands and faces with odoriferous waters, after which, being about to depart, the lady said to Salabetto, "So it be agreeable to thee, it were doing me a very great favor and thou camest this evening to sup, and lie the night with me." Salabetto, who was by this time altogether captivated by her beauty and the artful pleasantness of her fashions, and firmly believed himself to be loved of her as he were the heart out of her body, replied, "Madam, your every pleasure is supremely agreeable to me, wherefore both tonight and at all times I mean to do that which shall please you, and that which shall be commanded me of you." Accordingly the lady returned to her house, where she caused well bedeck her bedchamber with her dresses and gear, and letting make ready a splendid supper, awaited Salabetto, who, as soon as it was grown somewhat dark, betook himself thither, and being received with open arms, supped with all cheer and commodity of service. Thereafter they betook themselves into the bedchamber, where he smelt a marvellous fragrance of aloes wood, and saw the bed very richly adorned with Cyprian singing birds and store of fine dresses upon the pegs. All which things together, and each of itself, made him conclude that this must be some great and rich lady. And although he had heard some whispers to the contrary anent her manner of life, he would not anywise believe it, or, if he e'en gave so much credit thereto as to allow that she might erst have cozened others, for nothing in the world could he have believed that this might possibly happen to himself. He lay that night with her in the utmost delight, still waxing more enamored, and in the morning she girt him on a quaint and goodly girdle of silver, with a fine purse thereto, saying, "Sweet my Salabetto, I commend myself to thy remembrance. And like as my person is at thy pleasure, even so is all that is here, and all that dependeth upon me at thy service and commandment." Salabetto, rejoiced, embraced and kissed her. Then, going forth of her house, he betook himself whereas the other merchants were used to resort. On this wise consorting with her at one time and another, without its costing him aught in the world, and growing every hour more entangled, it befell that he sold his stuffs for ready money, and made a good profit thereby, of which the lady incontinent heard, not from him, but from others, and Salabetto being come one night to visit her, she fell to prattling and wantoning with him, kissing and clipping him, and feigning herself so enamored of him that it seemed she must die of love in his arms. Moreover, she would fain have given him 2 very fine hannops of silver that she had, but he would not take them, for that he had of her, at one time and another, what was worth a good 30 gold florins, without availing to have her take of him so much as a groat's worth. At last, whenas she had well enkindled him by showing herself so enamored and freehand, one of her slave girls called her, as she had ordained beforehand, whereupon she left the chamber, and coming back, after a while, in tears cast herself face downward on the bed, and fell to making the wofullest lamentation ever a woman made. Salabetto, marvelling at this, caught her in his arms, and fell a-weeping with her, and saying, "Alack, heart of my body, what aileth thee thus suddenly? What is the cause of this grief? For God's sake, tell it me, my soul." The lady, after letting herself be long entreated, answered, "Woe's me, sweet my lord, I know not what to say or to do. I have but now received letters from Messina, and my brother writeth me that, should I sell or pawn all that is here, I must without fail send him 1,000 gold florins within 8 days from this time, else will his head be cut off, and I know not how I shall do to get this sum so suddenly. Had I but 15 days' grace, I would find a means of procuring it from a certain quarter whence I am to have much more, or I would sell one of our farms. But as this may not be, I had liefer be dead than that this ill news should have come to me." So saying, she made a show of being sore afflicted and stinted not from weeping, whereupon quoth Salabetto, whom the flames of love had bereft of great part of his wonted good sense, so that he believed her tears to be true and her words truer yet, "Madam, I cannot oblige you with 1,000 florins, but 500 I can very well advance you, since you believe you will be able to return them to me within a fortnight from this time, and this is of your good fortune that I chanced but yesterday to sell my stuffs, for, had it not been so, I could not have lent you a groat." "Alack," cried the lady, "hast thou then been straitened for lack of money? Mary, why didst thou not require me thereof? Though I have not 1,000, I had 100 and even 200 to give thee. Thou hast deprived me of all heart to accept of thee the service thou profferest me." Salabetto was more than ever taken with these words and said, "Madam, I would not have you refrain on that account, for, had I had such an occasion therefore as you presently have, I would assuredly have asked you." "Alack, Salabetto mine," replied the lady, "now know I aright that thine is a true and perfect love for me, since, without waiting to be required, thou freely succoureth me, in such a strait, with so great a sum of money. Certes, I was all thine without this, but with this I shall be far more so, nor shall I ever forget that I owe thee my brother's life. But God knoweth I take it sore unwillingly, seeing that thou art a merchant, and that with money merchants transact all their affairs. However, since need constraineth me, and I have certain assurance of speedily restoring it to thee, I will e'en take it. And for the rest, and I find no readier means, I will pawn all these my possessions." So saying, she let herself fall, weeping, on Salabetto's neck. He fell to comforting her, and after abiding the night with her, he, next morning, to approve himself her most liberal servant, without waiting to be asked by her, carried her 500 right gold florins, which she received with tears in her eyes, but laughter in her heart, Salabetto contenting himself with her simple promise. As soon as the lady had the money, the signs began to change, and whereas before he had free access to her whensoever it pleased him, reasons now began to crop up, whereby it betided him not to win admission there once out of 7 times. Nor was he received with the same countenance, nor the same caresses and rejoicings as before. And the term at which he was to have had his moneys again being, not to say come, but passed by a month or 2, and he requiring them, words were given him in payment. Thereupon his eyes were opened to the wicked woman's arts and his own lack of wit, wherefore, feeling that he could say naught of her beyond that which might please her concerning the matter, since he had neither script nor other evidence thereof, and being ashamed to complain to any, as well for that he had been forewarned thereof as for fear of the scoffs which he might reasonably expect for his folly, he was beyond measure woeful and inwardly bewailed his credulity. At last, having had divers letters from his masters requiring him to change the moneys in question and remit them to them, he determined to depart, lest, and he did it not, his default should be discovered there, and accordingly, going aboard a little ship, he betook himself, not to Pisa, as he should have done, but to Naples. There at that time was our gossip Pietro dello Canigiano, treasurer to the Empress of Constantinople, a man of great understanding and subtle wit, and a fast friend of Salabetto and his family, and to him, as to a very discreet man, the disconsolate Florentine recounted that which he had done and the mischance that had befallen him, requiring him of aid and counsel, so he might contrive to gain his living there, and avouching his intention nevermore to return to Florence. Canigiano was concerned for this and said, "Ill hast thou done, and ill hast thou carried thyself. Thou hast disobeyed thy masters, and hast, at one cast, spent a great sum of money in wantonness. But, since it is done, we must look for other what." Accordingly, like a shrewd man as he was, he speedily bethought himself what was to be done and told it to Salabetto, who was pleased with the device and set about putting it in execution. He had some money, and Canigiano having lent him other some, he made up a number of bales well packed and corded. Then, buying a score of oil casks and filling them, he embarked the whole and returned to Palermo, where, having given the custom-house officers the bill of lading and the value of the casks and let enter everything to his account, he laid the whole up in the magazines, saying that he meant not to touch them till such time as certain other merchandise which he expected should be come. Bianco Fire, getting wind of this and hearing that the merchandise he had presently brought with him was worth good 2,000 florins, without reckoning what he looked for, which was valued at more than 3,000, bethought herself that she had flown at too small game, and determined to restore him the 500 florins, so she might avail to have the greater part of the 5,000. Accordingly, she sent for him, and Salabetto, grown cunning, went to her, whereupon, making believe to know nothing of that which he had brought with him, she received him with a great show of fondness, and said to him, "Harkee, if thou wast vexed with me, for that I repaid thee not thy moneys on the very day." Salabetto fell a-laughing and answered, "In truth, madam, it did somewhat displease me, seeing I would have torn out my very heart to give it you, and I thought to pleasure you withal, but I will have you hear how I am vexed with you. Such, and so great is the love I bear you, that I have sold the most part of my possessions, and have presently brought hither merchandise to the value of more than 2,000 florins, and expect from the westward as much more as will be worth over 3,000, with which I mean to stock me a warehouse in this city, and take up my sojourn here, so I may still be near you, meseeming I fare better of your love than ever lover of his lady." "Look you, Salabetto," answered the lady, "every commodity of thine is mighty pleasing to me, as that of him whom I love more than my life, and it pleaseth me amain that thou art returned hither with intent to sojourn here. For that I hope yet to have good time galore with thee, but I would fain excuse myself some deal to thee for that, when as thou wast about to depart, thou wouldst by times have come hither and couldst not, and whiles thou camest, and wast not so gladly seen as thou wast used to be, more by token that I returned thee not thy moneys at the time promised. Thou must know that I was then in very great concern and sore affliction, and whoso is in such case, how much soever he may love another, cannot always show him so cheerful a countenance or pay him such attention as he might wish. Moreover, thou must know that it is mighty uneasy for a woman to avail to find 1,000 gold florins. All day long we are put off with lies, and that which is promised us is not performed unto us, wherefore needs must we in our turn lie unto others. Hence cometh it, and not of my default, that I gave thee not back thy moneys. However, I had them a little after thy departure, and had I known whither to send them, thou mayst be assured that I would have remitted them to thee, but not knowing this, I kept them for thee." Then, letting fetch a purse wherein were the very moneys he had brought her, she put it into his hand, saying, "Count them if there be 500. Never was Salabetto so glad. He counted them, and finding them 500, put them up and said, "Madam, I am assured that you say sooth, but you have done enough to convince me of your love for me, and I tell you that, for this and for the love I bear you, you could never require me, for any your occasion, of whatsoever sum I might command, but I would oblige you therewith, and when as I am established here, you may put this to the proof." Having again on this wise renewed his loves with her in words, he fell again to using amicably with her, whilst she made much of him, and showed him the greatest goodwill and honour in the world, feigning the utmost love for him. But he, having a mind to return her cheat for cheat, being one day sent for by her to sup and sleep with her, went thither so chapfallen and so woebegone that it seemed as he would die. Bianco Fire, embracing him and kissing him, began to question him of what ailed him to be thus melancholy, and he, after letting himself be importuned a good while, answered, "I am a ruined man, for that the ship, wherein is the merchandise I expected, hath been taken by the corsairs of Monaco and held to ransom in 10,000 gold florins, whereof it falleth to me to pay 1,000, and I have not a farthing, for that the 500 pieces thou returnest to me I sent incontinent to Naples, to lay out in cloths to be brought hither, And should I go about at this present to sell the merchandise I have here, I should scarce get a penny for 2 pennyworth, for that it is no time for selling. Nor am I yet so well known that I could find any here to help me to this, wherefore I know not what to do or to say, for if I send not the money speedily, the merchandise will be carried off to Monaco, and I shall never again have aught thereof. The lady was mightily concerned at this, fearing to lose him altogether, and considering how she should do, so he might not go to Monaco, said, God knoweth I am sore concerned for the love of thee, but what availeth it to afflict oneself thus? If I had the moneys, God knoweth I would lend them to the incontinent, but I have them not. True, there is a certain person here who obliged me the other day with the 500 florins that I lacked, but he will have heavy usance for his moneys. Nay, he requireth no less than 30 in the 100, and if thou wilt borrow of him, needs must he be made secure with a good pledge. For my part, I am ready to engage for thee all these my goods and my person, to boot, for as much as he will lend thereon, but how wilt thou assure him of the rest? Salabetto readily apprehended the reason that moved her to do him this service, and divined that it was she herself who was to lend him the money, wherewith he was well pleased, and thanking her, answered that he would not be put off for exorbitant usance, need constraining him. Moreover, he said that he would give assurance of the merchandise he had in the custom-house, letting inscribe it to him who should lend him the money, but that needs must be kept the key of the magazines, as well that he might be able to show his wares. And it were required of him, as that nothing might be touched or changed or tampered withal. The lady answered that it was well said, and that this was good enough assurance, wherefore, as soon as the day was come, she sent for a broker, in whom she trusted greatly, and taking order with him of the matter, gave him 1,000 gold florins, which he lent to Salabetto, letting inscribe in his own name at the custom-house that which the latter had there. Then, having made their writings and counterwritings together, and being come to an accord, they occupied themselves with their other affairs. Salabetto, as soon as he might, embarked with the 1,500 gold florins on board a little ship, and returned to Pietro dello Canigiano at Naples, whence he remitted to his masters, who had dispatched him with the stuffs, a good and entire account thereof. Then, having repaid Pietro and every other to whom he owed aught, he made merry several days with Canigiano over the cheat he had put upon the Sicilian trickstress, after which, resolved to be no more a merchant, he betook himself to Ferrara. Meanwhile, Biancofire, finding that Salabetto had left Palermo, began to marvel and wax misdoubtful, and after having awaited him good 2 months, seeing that he came not, she caused the broker force open the magazines. Trying first the casks, which she believed to be filled with oil, she found them full of seawater, save that there was in each maybe a runlet of oil at the top near the bunghole. Then, undoing the bales, she found them all full of tow, with the exception of 2, which were stuffs, and in brief, with all that was there was not more than 200 florins worth. Wherefore Biancofire, confessing herself outwitted, long lamented the 500 florins repaid, and yet more the 1,000 lent, saying often, who with a Tuscan hath to do, must nor be blind nor see askew. On this wise, having gotten nothing for her pains but loss and scorn, she found, to her cost, that some folk know as much as others. No sooner had Dioneo made an end of his story than Loretta, knowing the term to be come beyond which she was not to reign, and having commended Canigiano's counsel, which was approved good by its effect, and Salabetto's shrewdness, which was no less commendable, in carrying it into execution, lifted the laurel from her own head, and set it on that of Emilia, saying, with womanly grace, Madam, I know not how pleasant a queen we shall have of you, but, at the least, we shall have a fair one. Look, then, that your actions be conformable to your beauties. So saying, she returned to her seat, whilst Emilia, a thought abashed, not so much at being made queen as to see herself publicly commended of that which women use most to covet, waxed such in face as are the new-blown roses in the dawning. However, after she had kept her eyes a while lowered, till the redness had given place, she took order with the seneschal of that which concerned the general entertainment, and presently said, "Delightsome ladies, it is common, after oxen have toiled some part of the day, confined under the yoke, to see them loosed and eased thereof, and freely suffered to go a pasturing, where most it liketh them, about the woods. And it is manifest also that leafy gardens, embowered with various plants, are not less, but much more fair than groves wherein one seeth only oaks. Wherefore, seeing how many days we have discoursed, under the restraint of a fixed law, I opine that, as well unto us as to those whom need constraineth to labor for their daily bread, it is not only useful, but necessary, to play the truant a while, and wandering thus afield, to regain strength to enter anew under the yoke. Wherefore, for that which is to be related tomorrow, ensuing your delectable usance of discourse, I purpose not to restrict you to any special subject, but will have each discourse according as it pleaseth him, holding it for certain that the variety of the things which will be said will afford us no less entertainment than to have discoursed of one alone. And having done thus, whoso shall come after me in the sovereignty may, as stronger than I, avail with greater assurance to restrict us within the limits of the wonted laws." So saying, she set every one at liberty till supper time. All commended the queen of that which she had said, holding it sagely spoken, and rising to their feet, addressed themselves, this to one kind of diversion, and that to another, the ladies to weaving garlands and to gambling, and the young men to gaming and singing. On this wise they passed the time until the supper hour, which being come, they supped with mirth and good cheer about the fair fountain, and after diverted themselves with singing and dancing according to the wonted usance. At last, the queen, to ensue the fashion of her predecessors, commanded Pamphilo to sing a song, notwithstanding those which sundry of the company had already sung of their free will, and he readily began thus: "Such is thy pleasure, love, and such the allegress I feel thereby, that happy, burning in thy fire am I, the abounding gladness in my heart that glows, for the high joy and dear, whereto thou hast me led, unable to contain their overflows, and in my face's cheer displays my happy head, for being enamored in such a worship-worthy place and high, makes eth to me the burning eye aby. I cannot with my finger what I feel, limb, love, nor do I know my bliss in song to vent. Nay, though I knew it, needs must I conceal. For, once divulged, I trow, 'twould turn to dreariment. Yet am I so content. All speech were halt and feeble, did I try the least thereof with words to signify. Who might conceive it that these arms of mine should anywise attain, whereas I've held them I, or that my face should reach so fair a shrine, as that of favour fain, and grace I've won to? Nay, such fortune ne'er a day, believed me were, whence all afire am I, hiding the source of my lease thereby." This was the end of Pamphilo's song, whereto, albeit it had been completely responded of all, there was none but noted the words thereof with more attent solicitude than pertained unto him, studying to divine that which, as he sang, it behoved him to keep hidden from them, and although sundry went imagining various things, nevertheless none happened upon the truth of the case. But the queen, seeing that the song was ended, and that both young ladies and men would gladly rest themselves, commanded that all should betake themselves to bed. Here in death the 8th day of the Decameron. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe to the channel by hitting the subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon to receive new content notifications.